Good morning, it's 3 minutes after 10 and yes, you are listening to the most popular talk show on UK commercial radio, so thank you for that. And thank you for Thomas for drawing some modest attention to it during his news bulletin. But onwards we go again. Here's a headline, UK's toxic water. And then I was going to say colon, but I sort of realised that might conjure up a slightly inappropriate image, or an entirely appropriate image, but an unwelcome one at 4 minutes after 10 on a Thursday morning. UK's toxic water, illegal sewage, parasite in taps, and higher bills on the way. It gets worse. Millions of litres of raw sewage dumped illegally into Windermere in the Lake District, as you know. We discussed it yesterday, as did Sheila. Environment Agency criticised for lack of enforcement action against polluting companies. An LBC exclusive about up to 10,000 hidden sewage pipes potentially fueling a 5-fold increase in fish deaths. This probably is the one that has stopped me most in my tracks this morning. But people across the whole of South Devon advised to boil their own tap water after 16 cases of diarrhea-type illness. A warning from one expert that people will die. Samples taken of water in rivers and lakes across the country showing traces of E. coli bacteria, various viruses. That's a nice phrase, various viruses. She sells seashells, like various viruses, toxic chemicals, and even radioactive substances in the water. Whatever next. It was in Parliament, indeed, that one campaigner warned MPs that somebody is going to die from pathogens in rivers. And the boss of the so-called watchdog has revealed that bills are going to go up again next month and may be nudging the £800 a year mark by 2030. Right, wait there. What do these companies have in common? Let's begin with Ontario Municipal Employees Retirement Scheme. This is one of Canada's largest pension plans with about 105 billion Canadian dollars of net assets and even manages sometimes essential infrastructure. So what do these companies have in common? The Ontario Municipal Employees Retirement Scheme, the Universities Superannuation Scheme, which is a pension scheme, a UK pension scheme for academic staff in UK universities. Infinity Investments, have you heard of them? They are a subsidiary of the Abu Dhabi Investment Authority and one of the world's largest sovereign wealth funds. Have you spotted it yet? Have you guessed it yet? British Columbia Investment Management Corporation, which is an investment management services provider for British Columbia's public sector. Hermes, or Hermes, depending on your pronunciation proclivities. GPE, one of Europe's leading independent specialists in global private markets. They also manage the BT pension scheme, which remains one of the largest in the private sector. Here's a nice one. China Investment Corporation, which is also one of the world's largest sovereign wealth funds. I give you the Queensland Investment Corporation. I could go on. I think you can work out where that is. Where do you think the Queensland Investment Corporation is based? Aquila GP, which is a leading infrastructure management firm and a wholly owned subsidiary of Fiera Infrastructure Inc. And finally, one which I will need a little help pronouncing properly, Stichting Pensioenfonds Zorg en Welzijn, which is, I'll say that again for anyone not paying attention, Stichting Pensioenfonds Zorg en Welzijn, which is a pension fund service provider managing several different pension funds as well as affiliated employers and their employees. I'm going to go out on a limb and suggest that it's probably Dutch. They have all, or currently do, own shares in Thames Water. They are the external shareholders. I'm going to carry on for a moment, if I may. Anglian Water is owned by Abu Dhabi, Australian, British and Canadian companies. Wessex Water is 100% owned by a Malaysian infrastructure conglomerate. United Utilities, meanwhile, which is the one responsible for pumping shocking amounts of untreated sewage into Windermere in the Lake District. That's listed on the stock exchange, so anyone can get a piece of that particularly dirty action. Welsh Water is a single-purpose company with no shareholders. Severn Trent is also listed on the stock exchange, while South East Water is 62% owned by the Australian Macquarie Group, with the rest being held by minority stakeholders feeding into the Green Sands Holding Company. Yorkshire Water, finally, is co-owned by a Singapore sovereign wealth fund, the Singapore sovereign wealth wealth fund, a Hong Kong-based investment firm, and an Australian pension scheme. I don't know why I mention all that. Thank you, Peter. Apparently my Dutch pronunciation was very good there. Heilige Geist. I don't know why I mentioned all that. I just thought it seemed relatively important. I can also tell you that in the 34 years since England's water was privatised by Margaret Thatcher, it is estimated that water companies... actually, I'm going to do this one as a bit of a teaser. Okay. In the 34 years... And you can't play this game if you were listening last time I played this game, all right? In the 34 years since England's water was privatised by Margaret Thatcher, water companies have paid out how many pounds to shareholders on average every year? That's the crucial bit right there. Every chuffing year. So have a guess. Go on. You can WhatsApp me, 0345 6060973. You can text 84850. I'm just going to wait to see what figures you do. Don't cheat. If you know the answer already, don't play this game. But every year, how much money do you think has made its way from people paying their water bills into the pockets of shareholders, whether it's foreign sovereign wealth funds or whether it is individual investors? Have a guess. It's 9 minutes after 10. We're doing some sort of live focus grouping now on the radio. Not even close. Nope. Higher. Nope. Higher. Someone stood in for me on holiday once. I won't embarrass them by telling you who it is, but they're now a very important presenter on Radio 4. And they did a text vote. And because the phones weren't ringing, they actually read out all the answers to the text vote. So there is a tape somewhere of this presenter going, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, I'm not going to be doing that yet. It's not 30 million, it's not 50 million, it's not 250 billion, don't be ridiculous, it's not 480 million, says Gordon. It's not 1.5 billion, Jim, and it's not 150 million either. This is turning in a bit to yes, no, isn't it? A bit, yeah. It's more fun than that, though. It is Mike in Southport, who clearly cheated. It is indeed about £2 billion a year. £2 billion a year. Why do I say pound in that context instead of pounds? Is that a northern thing? Is that a Midlands thing? Where does that come from? It doesn't make any sense at all. £2 billion. 2 billion nicker. £2 billion. £2 billion a year in payouts to shareholders. So there's some statistical support for you. And then we come back to this rather splendid piece of reportage on the front page of the I newspaper. And how many times recently have I touched upon the great work that the I newspaper is doing? Just a list of current problems, not even including LBC's exclusive yesterday about hidden sewage pipes killing fish. Millions of litres of raw sewage dumped illegally into Windermere. Environment Agency not really taking any action against polluting companies. If you're in South Devon, you've got to boil your tap water now. Otherwise, you risk violent diarrhoea. Samples taken in our rivers and lakes have found traces of E. coli bacteria, various viruses, various viral viruses, toxic chemicals, and even radioactive substances. A warning yesterday from one campaigner in Parliament that pathogens in rivers are actually going to kill somebody. And the boss of the so-called regulator, Ofwat, warning that bills are about to go up again next month. Meanwhile, £2 billion a year has been taken out of these companies in England alone every single year since Margaret Thatcher privatised them. 12 minutes after 10 is the time. Two questions here. And in many ways, these are the questions at the very heart of almost every conversation we have. I want the what and I want the why. But the what I want is easy. The why I want is not. I'm sounding like a Dr. Seuss character this morning, aren't I? The what I want is easy, but the why I want is not. The various viruses, viraling. I want to know how this has affected you, all right? Genuinely, I don't necessarily want this... to fill up the switch. I've got to stop being so fussy, haven't I, about my switchboard starts. You can't curate a switchboard with the level of painstaking detail that I sometimes expect you to provide at 30 minutes after 10 on a Thursday morning. So how has it affected you? Right from, I remember the first time we opened these floodgates, if you pardon the pun, and there were people whose entire lives had been turned upside down. People, if you've got a surfing school and the bit of beach where you set up your surfing school with dreams of a long and glittering future is now covered in shocking amounts of untreated sewage, or the water into which you would go. So you let the kids swim in the river last summer, and one of them, well, I don't know quite how to phrase these things, but one of them's backside exploded as a consequence, or you got an infection in a cut, or the consequences of having filthy water. 0345 6060 973. If you're in South Devon and you're boiling your water, what the heck is that like now? I mean, just the impact upon us of all of these factors. But the question that I am, if anything, more interested in, and hit the numbers now, you will get through, 0345 6060 973. Just tell me the point at which you realised that this problem does actually affect people. Because I think part of the answer to the next question is it's hard sometimes to make that final connection to humanity. Robert suggests they won't be happy until there's a cholera outbreak. Do you see what I mean? The final connection. So I can read you all of these stories. I can hit you over the head with all of these statistics. I can flap these figures in your face until you're frustrated. But until it actually gets into your life, it doesn't quite work. Because that is how I think they've got away with it. That is how I think it has been allowed to happen. There is something missing in that final synapse, that final societal synapse, where the spark comes out of the emitter, but it doesn't reach the receptor until something happens in your life that brings home the seriousness of this situation. So that's why question number 2 is why? I mean, if it wasn't for Fergal Sharkey, there's a very strong chance we still wouldn't be talking about it. Fergal's steering this issue. As a consequence, do you know, I don't know whether you know the origin story of Fergal's fascination with the state of our waterways. It's because he likes fishing in trout streams, in chalk rivers specifically, which this country historically is, I mean, far and away the most fertile site on the planet for chalk rivers in which trout can swim. And it was because of his enthusiasm for that pastime that he got an early heads up, if you like, on just how bad the direction of traffic was. So how has it affected you? 0345 6060 973. But why does it remain a story that has not captured the imagination of the nation? There's nothing more integral, except possibly air. There's nothing more integral to our very survival as a species than water. And the people we have charged with ensuring a safe supply of water, ensuring a clean supply of water, not just for drinking, but also for swimming in, for leisure activities. The people we have entrusted with that role have betrayed us on an unimaginable level, while also trousering £2 billion a year of our money. Just stop and think about that. I don't know, when does the clock start? When does the decline begin? When does the catastrophe commence? I don't know what date we would put on it. That's another question you can answer on 0345 6060 973. Did it begin with privatisation? I think it probably did. But why are we... I hate this question as a topic, but every now and then, once or twice a year, I allow myself to indulge it. Why aren't we angrier about this? Why aren't we angrier? It's the only topic it reminds me of, oddly, is climate change in general. Climate change, catastrophe on the horizon, and yet we sort of have a cognitive dissonance going on in that we know it's awful, but we're not angry enough. In fact, the people who are sufficiently and correctly angry, like Greta Thunberg, paint targets on their back to be attacked by all the professional idiots in the media and politics. But this one's different because this is entirely inflicted upon us by a tiny minority of people. You can't say I bear responsibility for this one because I don't do my recycling or I go on foreign holidays in an aeroplane. I bear no responsibility for this. I pay my water bills in full expectation of a level of service that simply doesn't exist. So why are we not angrier? Or, which is a slightly different question, why do we not care more? 0345 6060 973. Because if I had to assemble a story designed to cause public outrage, it would look a lot like this. And yet the public outrage simply isn't there. And I just want to explore why you think that is, because no one knows for sure. Why do you think that is? So there you go, the what of it. How have you been affected by the state of British water, or English water perhaps more pertinently? And why does this obvious scandal not resonate in anything like the way that you would expect it to? 0345 6060 973. 21 minutes after 10. I mean, we're not very French. That could be part of the answer. I don't like to indulge in national stereotyping, but when the French public are angry about something being inflicted upon them from above, they take to the streets, don't they? Why do we allow these water companies to continue to absolutely rinse us while providing an extraordinarily poor standard of service? Chris is in Brixham. Chris, what's going on? Oh, you're in the middle of it.
Yeah, I am indeed, James. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's quite appalling, actually. We woke up yesterday. Unfortunately, my wife is on the Facebook Brixham page,
right,
and spotted some announcements, but nothing at all from South West Water, other than to say it's safe to drink the water, which it now turns out, of course, is completely false.
I don't know exactly where the catchment area is for this warning in South Devon, but you're there and you don't know either, by the sounds of it.
Well, we do now. We had an email yesterday from South West Water.
Let me get this straight. So it started off as a rumour on the Brixham Facebook page. The water company denied that there was anything to worry, insisted that there was nothing to worry about, and then latterly got in touch to say, don't drink the water. Do not drink the water.
Well, yes. I mean, fortunately, because we've registered and got the email address, that's all fine. My mum, who's 87, also lives in Brixham. Nothing. I mean, fortunately, I'm here, but
because she's not an online person.
She's not online.
No.
She wouldn't have got an email. She saw it on the news, but that was a week after cryptosporidia had started to break out in the area.
Do you know anyone that's been poorly?
I don't personally.
Well, get out, will you, man? Seriously, do some bloody journalism. Get out there, shout out the window or something. Find me someone.
Listen, we've got to drive 4 miles to go and get the water that they've supplied in the bottles.
Is that right?
They've not even supplied it in Brixham.
You've got to go to Paignton, I think.
Well, it's between here and Paignton, actually.
So, I mean, we're going to do that blitz spirit nonsense, aren't we? I don't mean the blitz spirit is nonsense. I mean, it's nonsense when we're applying it to having to boil your own tap water in 2024. But why do you think there isn't more of a groundswell of proper rage and unhappiness about this? Because, as I said earlier, apart from air, there is nothing more essential to our survival than water, and they're making huge amounts of money, and they are not they're not providing the most basic service. Turn your tap on, and you can't drink what comes out.
I think it's because there's no one held to account, no matter what you do.
So you don't know where the target is. You might have the sharpest darts in town, but you don't know where to lob them.
Well, and I think if you saw somebody being held to account and not millions or billions of pounds worth of profit being given to shareholders, as opposed to some significant fines, maybe somebody put in jail. Having run a multi-million-pound business myself, if I'd have done that, I would have been in jail. Yes, I think
that's actually a valid point. I mean, how the heck do you hold a Chinese sovereign wealth fund to account? You don't. So you find the people running the company and you smack them from here to kingdom come, metaphorically.
They're invisible people. And actually, from a personal point of view, this weekend is Dark Music Festival. My son's in a band. The whole band are staying with us.
Oh, Lord.
We'll have 10 people in the house.
Mate, how old is your son? How old is your son?
He's 30.
Oh, I thought at least they're not teenagers. I thought you were about to tell me that you had a house full of teenage boys and limited washing facilities. That could be.
Well, no, but I mean, they worried about taking showers, and actually, there's no warnings at all about pets.
Right.
And actually, your animals can if you. So you might be boiling the water for yourself, but if you don't boil the water and Yeah, you
Cat
could
out
be.
the ball.
Yeah.
When does it end? Have they told you? When does it end?
No idea at all.
Well, no indication at all of when you might be able to drink out of your taps again.
Nothing at all.
It's just extraordinary. And you're right, actually. That's a very good point. I don't think you need to have run a multi-million-pound business to make that point, but it gives you an extra level of qualification if you have. In other areas, you would expect, to be held to account. If my listening figures were, I don't know, down 30%, for example, over the whole of last year, my listening hours, I would not expect to be here today. Happily, we're up 70,000 on the last quarter and are rightly replaced as the most popular talk show on UK commercial radio. But, I mean, how can you be running a water company and not be getting into any trouble at all at this time? That's actually extraordinary. And it makes the second line of the iNewspapers reporting today, the line about the Environment Agency being criticised for lack of enforcement, something that Fergal Sharkey has been shouting from the rooftops for the longest time. It makes it even more execrable, doesn't it? Thank you, Chris. Stay safe, mate. As I say, we're doing that British thing of seeing the funny side and reaching for the blitz spirit, but I don't think it's actually appropriate, and it might be part of the problem. Louise is in Tunbridge Wells. Are you disgusted?
I am very, very disgusted.
I'm very glad to hear it. It's a geographical requirement, I believe.
It is indeed. I was calling because my family, my husband and I, have a small flat in Rustington, which is a little low-key place on the south coast between Worthing and Bognor.
Very nice.
And we bought it and we use it as a holiday place for ourselves, and our family use it, and friends go to stay there. We don't rent out,
How delightful.
It is. It's lovely. We don't fly. I mean, and we don't go on other expenses.
Well, there's no airport in Rustington. There's no airport in Rustington, is there, Louise? You couldn't fly even if you wanted to.
Along the coast.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, we've had it for about 5 years, and almost since we got it, starting slowly but building up much more over the last couple of years. You keep getting these notifications from Surfers Against Sewage and all the Worthing seems to be quite bad, and Bognor, there seem to be a lot of releases out in there, to the extent that now, I let people go and stay there, but I say, don't go in the water. And even because the tide comes in so far and then goes out again, I don't even really want to sit on the beach.
No.
Because you imagine what it's brought in with it. But the really annoying thing is that, in fact, we used to have a similar little flat in a seaside town in northern France.
Oh, yes.
Which we had for quite a few years, and we sold, actually, in August 2019, just because Brexit was coming up. I mean, obviously, I'm a Remain voter, but I just figured it was going to lead to problems getting across there so quickly and easily as we used to, so we just decided we'd sell it. But, in all the time we had it, 14 years, we never once had cause to think, I didn't go in the water.
I mean, it's a beautiful comparison because it just makes your sort of eyes come out on stalks. You're just sort of, what are we doing? How are we just sort of letting this wash over us or not?
Absolutely. I mean, it's terrible. I mean, and I actually think, the amount of poo that's being pumped into the channel and the waters.
And Windermere, of all places.
Absolutely.
It is. Yeah. So what's your theory on why, I don't know that French would stand for it actually, but why do you think we are relatively supine in the face of this scandal?
Well, you're right. The French would be out in the streets and protesting. I don't know. The British people don't seem to. But also, everybody I know is very cross about the poo, but everybody I know thinks helpless.
I hope someone switched on just at that moment. Just how the radio came. Everybody I know is very cross about the poo and thought, what the hell is happening on this radio station?
It is absolutely awful, but I think there's a sense of helplessness because we do not know
who to get angry with.
And
there is, this is, Fergal Sharkey makes this point. There is how many people could name the chief executive of the water regulator Ofwat? I am going to cautiously suggest nobody listening to this programme at this point in time, except possibly his wife, who may have turned off in horror. I don't think anybody listening to this programme out there. Louise, can you name him?
I cannot.
No. Carolyn in Eastbourne, can you name him?
No, sadly not, but I'd love to know his phone number.
I'm coming to you first after the news. Keith, do you know his name? Eleanor, what's the name of the head of Ofwat? You're a thrusting, high-flying young journalist. What's the name of the... No? Roxy? Any idea? Head of Ofwat? Do we know? Anyone upstairs? Hello? Anyone upstairs? Head of Ofwat? Anybody? Thomas Watts is here with your headlines. 10:34 is the time, and no prizes if you Googled it. David Black is the name of the man who is currently chief executive of the so-called water regulator Ofwat. A rather splendid piece in the newspaper today by Fergal Sharkey, treating him with precisely the level of respect that he deserves. And I don't know how much blame can be laid at his door. He's supposed to be the regulator, but he can only regulate within the rules and rights that he has as the regulator. And do you know what happened in the House of Commons yesterday? It's never quite as straightforward as a headline can sometimes make it appear. But the Liberal Democrats had an amendment before the House yesterday to the criminal justice bill that would have created new offences if firms did not do enough to deal with sewage spills. It would, in fact, have criminalised water companies that don't tackle sewage spills. It came out on the same day that we learned 10 million litres of untreated sewage had been dumped into water in the Lake District, notably Windermere. Liberal Democrats brought it forward. Labour abstained, and the Tories voted against it. So sometimes the planets align politically, don't they? That happened on the same day that we learned about Windermere. And thank you to Simon for appreciating my efforts today to get the terminology and nomenclature of the Lake District correct. Windermere in the Lake District, you see, rather than Lake Windermere, which would be a tautology because mere means lake. Every day's a school day on this programme. We're about to do a haiku. That's never happened. We're about to make radio history by turning a text into a haiku. Gary has sent me a text and I have turned it into a haiku. In fact, I may start a little new tradition during the news bulletins, because I need a little bit of time to do it. I'll pick a text or a tweet or a WhatsApp message and I will turn it into a haiku. Do you want to hear Gary's haiku? Gary sent me a text. Here it is in haiku. Do you know what a haiku is? A haiku, of course, is a Japanese poetic form that consists of 3 lines, 5 syllables in the first line, 7 in the second, and 5 in the third. This is Gary Burton's text in haiku form. Worthing on Sunday didn't let kids in the sea. It looked very brown. That's a haiku, 575. It's not what he sent me. I've haikued it, just to give it a bit of poetic heft. Thank you. I thought so too. Carolyn's in Eastbourne. Sorry, Carolyn, I got a bit distracted by my haikuing. What did you want to say?
Good morning, James.
Hello.
Thank you very much for having me on.
You're very welcome.
Well, I co-founded a dippers group after the pandemic.
Oh, yes.
And we started with 2 of us, and we gathered women who, as we were drinking our post-dip coffee.
Oh, yes.
And they said, what are you up to? You swimming in the water? Oh, you must be mad. And we started at the end of November, so we were a bit barking, but that was fun. Anyway, we managed to get 42 women now on our group, and about 20 of them swim regularly.
Oh, fantastic.
And it's fantastic. But we are fed up to the back teeth of having to keep looking at different apps to see if we're able to swim or not.
Because there's no centralised advice. There's no...
No. And I don't trust Southern Water for putting the right stuff up anyway.
No.
They put a big green tick over Eastbourne, and then there are big red crosses on their beach buoy all around the other side.
Is
and then
that right? So what do you do? What do you do then?
Well, we check out the surface against sewage.
Yes. And they're volunteers, I think, aren't they?
They are. But the thing is, we'd like to be able to test our own water. But, it's very difficult to do that.
You've got to go through a special... start. You need laboratories.
Well, it's expensive.
Yes,
exactly.
Also, you can't be doing that every time you want to go. What you really want is not to test your own water, but to be confident that you don't need to test it. I'd want to go swimming, please. When did it start? Yeah. Can you you only started the group after the pandemic, so you're not much used to me when it comes to... when did the decline begin?
Well, I can tell you that we've had 2... Airbornes in Eastbourne, which is our lovely air show, which is a free event.
Yes.
And it's the beaches are packed those 2 weekends.
Right.
Now, for the last 2 years, the water quality has not been safe enough to encourage people to swim.
Oh, dear.
So, that makes me very angry.
I put a date on it, because growing up, it was sometimes bad, wasn't it? And then...
Yeah, but I think this is getting to the point that nobody seems to be...
And this is the bit I don't understand.
Toothless.
Well, we know that, but we're not. Or maybe we are.
And Environment Agency is toothless. And I think they're all pandering to the fact that these people are so, in the water companies, and the whole money side of it is so convoluted. But there is a way through this, I think.
Go on.
And in Hastings, a great lady called Katie has set up something where you don't have a direct debit anymore for your water bills. This is her advice. You don't have a direct
don't get me
debit.
into trouble, Carolyn.
No, I won't get you into trouble.
Okay.
And we're talking about cancelling our sewage part, or cancel for clean water. If they're not doing the sewage part safely,
yes.
Why should we have to pay for it? I don't go into a shop and if I don't get something, I don't pay for it.
You bought a loaf of bread and you got it home and there were 8 slices missing. You'd be rightly aggrieved.
In the middle.
You'd be rightly aggrieved,
exactly.
or a big hole down the middle of it. Has anyone ever got poorly as a consequence of swimming in your? I mean, I don't want
people get. Yeah, we do know that people feel sick afterwards sometimes, and that they've had ear infections.
Yeah, you see, they're gross, aren't they? Ear infections can be absolutely horrible.
Very unkind, and they can make you actually deaf and. You need surgery and all that sort of thing.
Well, I mean, it's a tough one. We're happy swimming. We do. We need people need to be able to know where to go and what to do and how to feel safe. But when did it? Can anyone put a proper finger on it? I wonder. I bet Fergal can. When did it really begin to decline? Because you can't say it was privatisation, I don't think, albeit that it's £2 billion a year since that started in England, because it was fine 10 years ago, wasn't it? I'm pretty sure that we were boasting about having some of the cleanest beaches in Europe not that long ago. So when did the pendulum start swinging back? I love the notion of pendulums or pendula in the news, because it's pretty much the human condition, is that we allow things to go so far one way, we finally say enough is enough, and then they swing back the other way, but then they swing back too far the other way, and we say, oh, enough is enough, and they start swinging back again. You have about 19 seconds in the middle where everything is perfect, like a tide, actually, like a slack tide on a river, where you can actually jump in and swim for about 20 minutes before it comes back in again after it's gone out. But the slack tide on the pendulum, when was it? When did things actually start going down? If it was a graph, when did the graph start coming down, as opposed to staying steady or even rising a little? I don't know. Perhaps you do. 03, you can have Carolyn's phone line. That's the only one free into the studio. 0345 606 0973. Mark's in Farnham. Mark, what would you like to say?
I'd like this. Water everywhere, but not a drop to drink.
There we go.
Now,
and what an awful stink, more like.
I mean, for me, I'm going to talk about drinking water. I love beaches, I love swimming, but it's the drinking water that really does concern me. Where did it all begin? Victorian ages, I say, but
well, no, you can't have that, because it wasn't. I mean, that sewage, that's Bazalgette, isn't it? That was a good thing.
I know.
That was.
Listen, we did a fantastic job, Dan. Now,
yes.
So the ancient mariner, water everywhere. He was a prophet. The problem is now.
Well, he wasn't a prophet. He was a sailor. He was in the middle of the sea, and he was surrounded by salt water. So he wasn't actually making a prediction about the state of our drinking water 100 years after Coleridge wrote the actual, more than 100 years after Coleridge. But anyway, listen, talk to me about what a mess we're in and why we are not angry.
Self-regulated industry. So let's take the subject of trihalomethane, something nobody's ever heard of before. It's a carcinogenic that is created when you boil a chlorinated water that has an organic in it. So when you boil, so the industry.
You might be losing the room here, mate. But I'm going to let you run with it for a bit.
Thank you very much. Right. So self-regulated industry, people. So let's just say that they set the industry standard levels at 100, and they say it's okay, you've only got 50. 50's bad, and then what they'll do when they can't get nearer to 100, they'll say actually the legal limit's now 150. The state of the drinking water in this country is quite shocking. We have some of the best drinking water in this country at face value,
right.
But I have, because of the business I'm in, I have seen wells that have been drinkable 10 years ago that are now completely dead due to agricultural runoff.
Yes.
And I'm also seeing the fact that with the wastewater, which we're talking about here,
yes.
Is it a population issue? Don't know. Too many houses, too many people. The cryptosporidium breakouts down in Devon that happened yesterday. Now,
what's that about? What's that about? Do you think?
Well, that's back to, and I'll tell you exactly what that's about. Thank you for asking, James.
Well, you're very welcome. That's what you're here for.
Thanks. So E. coli takes about a 2-second contact with chlorine for it to be deactivated.
Okay.
Cryptosporidium is 15 days.
Right.
15 days. So what will they do? They will just keep adding more and more chlorine to the water, and of course that will.
And where will the cryptosporidium have come from originally, do you think?
It would have come from volatile organic compounds that are in the water.
So that could be sewage dumping, could it?
It could be sewage dumping. It will be because through no fault of, so things like steroids and PFAS chemicals, which are now prevalent in our drinking water. There's steroids and PFAS is now in every.
But that's not
system.
enough to have caused this, though, is it?
Yes.
In and of it. So it's untreated.
Yes.
Sewage getting into the water system.
It's not treated effectively.
Well, if I put you in charge today, Rishi said, I'll read you a line from the newspaper.
Yeah, go on.
It is only news of major spills in the Lake District and contamination in Devon is only likely to pile more pressure on Rishi Sunak to take stronger action on the water industry, writes
Brilliant.
Richard Vaughan in The Eye. It's a very good coverage today in that newspaper. So you're Rishi Sunak, all right?
Yeah.
Why do you wear your trousers so short?
Because I am short and it takes the mind off of what I'm talking about.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, you're laughing at my trousers. They're not listening to.
That's a very good point. I hadn't thought of it that way around. So you are Rishi Sunak. What are you going to do today to address, to do this thing, to pile more pressure, to take stronger action on the water industry? What are you going to do?
I'm going to take the water industry back.
Just renationalise it and start from there.
I'm going to renationalise it. I'm going to give every household in the country a budget of £400 to have a water filter.
Just to be clear, you are in the water filtration business.
I'm not about to mention brands and businesses. No. All I'm going to say is it concerns me that.
So we get everyone gets a filter, and all the money that is made goes back into the industry with no shareholder. I mean, it is a bit obvious, isn't it, when you put it like that? But in terms of the situation as it currently stands,
every man for himself.
Well, but what would you do? Would you jail the CEOs of Waterco? Would you criminalise failure to clean up the sewage spills? I mean, what could?
Criminalise sewage spills. Yeah, the problem is that when you've got profits involved, sadly the very nature of humanity is cutting costs to make an income. We get that. They're not evil people. They're not wrong people. They're just a little bit misled with the wrong motivations.
Right. Okay. You're generous, possibly more generous than me. I'd like to see some metaphorical heads roll on this one because of the relationship between the profits being made and the poo being pumped. It's a rather agreeable alliteration. Mark, stay safe. Thank you for that. 10:46 is the time. All right. Hand on heart, do you think we can link this to Brexit? Do you think we can link this to Brexit? Find out after this. 10:49, you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It's Thursday, of course, so Mystery Hour on the way at 12. In the next hour, going to be looking at these. I told you yesterday I didn't want to talk about the new sex education announcements until the dust had settled a bit, and now it's settled and things are as bad as we feared. It appears that the government has based its proposals upon largely evidence-free fulminating from so-called think tanks and right-wing commentators and politicians. Who was the MP who said that they were teaching children that there were 73 different genders, and then she was asked for proof and she just went silent? She went all tumbleweed. Is it Miriam Cates? Is she the one that does all this stuff? I don't understand this right-wing obsession with children's health education. PHSE, I think it was called when mine were going through it. It's a really weird thing. But here's a phrase I don't think I've ever said before, and I doubt I will ever say again. Are you ready for it? There's a very good comment piece in the Daily Telegraph today that addresses directly the fears and concerns that I and most teachers have about the government's direction of travel. And we'll get onto that in the next hour. Back to the water, back to the curious question of why we are not more exercised by what they have done to us. But first, to answer that little tease about Brexit. Can we link it to Brexit, do you think? This is a report from the 9th of May, which is a week ago, to the day, in fact, a week ago today. England's rivers are likely to remain in a poor state for years to come because the government is failing to put in place EU clean water laws post-Brexit, the watchdog has found. When Britain was a member of the EU, the government was required to follow the Water Framework Directive, standards for waterways that have been credited with cleaning up Europe's dirty water. Since Brexit, the UK is no longer required to match EU regulations and has its own watchdog, the Office for Environmental Protection. Under the WFD, or the Water Framework Directive, all rivers are supposed to attain good ecological status by 2027. In 2019, the last time full water assessments took place, just 14% of rivers were in good ecological ecological health, and none met standards for good health. And it is indeed a report by the OEP, or the Office for Environmental Protection, that says we've seen little change in recent years, despite measures designed to improve matters. As things stand, government will not meet its ambition that most water bodies will be on the road to good condition or else already in that state by 2027. And the same government, of course, the same party, of course, yesterday voted against Liberal Democrat attempts to criminalise failure to clean up these spills. And the Labour Party abstained as well, so no pat on the head for them. Keir Starmer currently giving a speech about how changed the Labour Party is. Natasha Clark is there. There's no earthly way I'm taking all these speeches live, by the way. There's about one every 20 minutes now. Sunak pops up, and 20 minutes later, Keir Starmer pops up. At least he knows how to roll up his sleeves, Keir Starmer. Did you see the state of Rishi Sunak's sleeves yesterday? Can we make sure Natasha knows I wanted to talk about Rishi Sunak's sleeves when she comes on to tell us about Keir Starmer's speech, which I'm hearing from people on the ground is actually very strong. So we'll find out more about that shortly. And one day I'll tell you my story about Tony Blair's sleeves that was shared with me by Steve Coogan. Have I told you that story already? It's a really good story. Anyway, back to the water. Hang on, we've already spoken to Chris in Brixham. Why are you here again?
No, you haven't spoken to me yet. This is the first.
Well, this is ridiculous. I've waited years to speak to someone called Chris from Brixham, and now two have come along at once. What can you tell us, Chris?
Down this way.
Go on.
So I'm at the Hillhead, near Hillhead, so I'm high Brixham.
Yes.
Where we're all affected, and we have been. I've had it since the 5th. So.
What, diarrhoea?
Yeah. I'd say that the numbers which have been reported in the papers are just so underreported. It's ridiculous.
I've got 22 cases already confirmed.
Yeah, that's bonkers.
How many do you know personally?
In my small close alone, I'd say 60% of the people have had it.
Right, how many people are in your close? You can't just give me a percentage.
Yeah. Well, okay, so there's probably about 20 people in my close.
Right, and more than half of them, you reckon, already?
Yeah, absolutely. There's 3 in my household. So
how unpleasant? I mean, I'm bearing in mind people might be having a mid-morning sandwich. How unpleasant is it?
It's just very watery at first, and then it goes, but then you've got stomach cramps. I've had it since the 5th, and I've still got stomach cramps.
That's 11 days, mate.
Yeah, I know.
Have you been to the doctors?
It takes 3 weeks to get rid of it.
Have you been to the doctor?
Minimum. No, well, this was the next point I'm coming to. So, because it's being underreported, is because most people don't bother. I thought it was food poisoning at first, as most people probably did.
Yeah, of course, dodgy curry.
And then, even when you know you got it, what's the point of going? You're going to get a sample. They say you got it, but there's nothing you can do about it.
You're
going
to have to sit it out for 3 weeks anyway. You know, make sure you're rehydrating and stuff like that, aren't you? You're not.
That's the problem. At first, they were saying keep it rehydrating, so I was drinking more tap water.
Oh no! Because that's what you would do with normal diarrhea. What are you doing now? Have you got lots of bottled water? You've got lots of bottled water.
Yeah, well, we got a lot of bottled water, but obviously stores run out at first, but now they're starting to get it in a lot more.
It's like something out of 28 days later.
But I expect the numbers are in the thousands.
Yeah, well, the point is that you can only have a confirmed case, I suppose, to be fair to the health service.
Unless people actually go out and get
precisely. You've got to go to the doctors, you've got to provide a sample, you've got to do all of that. But just anecdotally, if that's just one close in Brixham, goodness knows, if it was 60% of every street in town, then you've got, Yeah,
it's major numbers. Brixham alone had 16,000 people.
Eesh. Why do you think, and I imagine you're pretty cross this week, if you've got the energy, why do you think...
No, I don't know. It's done wonders for my waist. But
has it really? Well, every cloud. Why do you think it's not more of a national scam? I mean, we talk about it. Everyone's cross, but there's not... It's as if the cogs are turning, but the teeth aren't biting. Do you know what I mean?
There's too much money in it. There's so much money in this game. Do
you think that's what it is?
Cloak and daggers and, indeed.
It's just hard to pinpoint the precise target, but if you could just get the messaging right, and you would say, like the Lib Dems tried to do in Parliament yesterday, if you are responsible for a massive spill and you don't clean it up, you're going to jail, or you're going to be fined so much that your shareholders will come for you with pitchforks. Chris, I wish you a speedy recovery, you and the family. Can we go for a hat-trick? Can we get a third Chris in Brixham? That would be radio. We've already done the first ever haiku, turning a text to a radio programme into a haiku. Can we now get the first ever hat-trick of... Would it be the first ever? It'd be certainly the first time anyone's ever had 3 Chris's in Brixham on the same show in the space of an hour, but would it be the same name from the same town 3 times? Would that be record-breaking as well? John's in Hastings. John, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, James. Good morning.
Hello.
It was something of a bit of historical context on your question.
Oh, yes,
of
please.
When did this all start?
Yes.
Years and years and years ago.
But that's not an answer, is it, John? Honestly. Flipping heck, man. I need more detail than that, don't I? Go on.
So it was years ago we had separate water authorities. You had South West Water, you had Wessex Water. Some of these things still exist, obviously, in name. But they were responsible for all manner of things, from sewage treatment to also river, looking after the ecology of the rivers, even doing things like handing out fishing licenses to anglers. And as a lad, I grew up in North Devon, and I remember in the 80s, the rivers were absolutely toxic down there. But
That's
in 1989,
right, they were, yes.
In 1989, the National Rivers Authority was formed, and that took away all of the sort of non-sewagey things away from the water boards, and they started to really, really improve the quality of the rivers. And the Water Framework Directive, which you've already mentioned, came along, and they were responsible for looking after that. But of course, then in 1996, they were turned into the Environment Agency, that's what we now know as the Environment Agency.
So it's a proper pendulum. It's gone from self-regulation to regulation, and then back effectively to self-regulation.
Absolutely.
And when it's self-regulation, listen, I mean, just so that people understand it, John, forgive me, because you're talking about it from I think you used to work for the National River Authority. But the way that these people running these companies, I mean, it's so simple to understand. Here is £100 on the table. You can either keep it or you can spend it on fixing that pipe over there. And they are free to make that choice.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to keep it.
The shareholders want it, so that's where it goes.
We're keeping it. We're not fixing it. Why would we fix that pipe if we don't have to? There's £100. There's £1 million. There's £2 billion on the table. We're going to keep that. And it is that simple. We can overthink it sometimes.
The pendulum effect is a really good example. As a fisherman myself, I've seen the rivers go from absolutely horrendous and completely devoid of things like salmon and sea trout to actually improving and really quite good to absolutely horrendous. In my sort of 50 short years on this planet, I've seen it go from rubbish to quite good to rubbish again.
Back to rubbish again, and we've all sat around kind of letting it slide, haven't we? Why do you think that is? Why do you think we are so supine or relaxed or unexercised?
People say it's because we're British and it's not the British way to jump up and down and shout about things, and we need to be more French about it. And we absolutely do. My grandfather used to say, come the revolution, son, we'll be at the Houses of Parliament with our pitchforks. And it's possibly time that we need to be doing something like that.
We've never had one, really, have we? Unlike most European countries. Well, I guess the media have to bear a lot of responsibility as well, because they can get you whipped up about gender-neutral toilets, apparently, or rainbow land. Well, I don't know if they can, actually, but they can certainly get you whipped up about immigration or small boats or Brussels. So if they really put their shoulder to the wheel on the stuff that truly matters, like the state of our waterways, there maybe the rest would follow. But then you sometimes wonder whether the media is the tail wagging the dog or the public is the tail wagging the media. I honestly don't know. And a lot of that analysis will apply to the conversation we're going to have next, which is about sex education in schools and what looks to me like almost a charter for child abuse being introduced by this government. It is 3 minutes after 11. Labour really moving their A-game front and centre, I think, this morning, looking at some of the coverage of this speech that Keir Starmer is currently giving. You've got the CEO of Boots in the audience, a senior counter-terrorism officer, a terminal cancer patient, and each one of them being linked to a key offer to the public, one of these big pledges that Keir Starmer is unveiling today. We will catch up with Natasha Clark, who is in the room where it happens, shortly. But I think it's worth pointing out that on Monday, Rishi Sunak gave a speech at an opaquely funded Westminster think tank, attended only by journalists and other Tory MPs. But for reasons that no one's been fully able to unravel, at the same time, the Minister for Common Sense... At the same time, the Minister for Common Sense, Esther McVey, was giving a speech about lanyards. So, I mean, that's just beautiful in so many ways. So he's promising to protect us from the hooded claw, but he can't even arrange a schedule to ensure that a prime ministerial speech does not run contiguously with a speech by the Minister for Common Sense, Esther McVey. But also, of course, on the same day, they accidentally released the details of a few hundred people on their mailing lists. But also unable to recognise or run the organisation in a way that allows his own speech to be the main focus of attention, because the Minister for Common Sense, Esther McVeigh's speech about lanyards ended up attracting some of the attention away from him. So, I mean, mismanagement, poor optics, bad politics, extraordinary. I'm going to have to start stepping up my critiquing and scrutiny of Starmer soon, because the election edges ever closer, and there is an awful lot on that man's shoulders that we need to have a proper butcher's at before merely just signing up to the changes are good as a rest school of politics. So Natasha, anyway, will bring us up to date on this speech shortly. Mystery Hour on the way at 12. We're going to catch up with Dale Vince, actually, who is something of a visionary in the field of energy, a little later, and find out what he makes of this great British energy proposal at the heart of Keir Starmer's offer today. And also, although I haven't cleared this with him yet, I'd quite like to hear some details of his recent victory over the Daily Mail, which, colour me shocked, hasn't received much coverage in the right-wing British media. So Dale spoke to us about that, actually, on Full Disclosure, and there is now a conclusion to that interesting story, which I'm hoping he'll be able to tell us a little bit more about a little later this hour. So here's the thing, right? Primary pupils will not be taught sex education until they are in year 5. That means they'll be aged about 9. There won't be any discussion about explicit sexual acts until they are 13, but they will be taught about revenge porn. They'll be taught about the dangers of the internet and how some adults can pretend to be children, but they won't be taught about what actual abuse would look like, because they won't be able to address explicit sexual acts. They'll be warned about sharing images without reference to sexual imagery, and about the importance of not pressuring others into sharing imagery. I mean, listen, the details have emerged since yesterday. I think that the whole thing is simply designed to smuggle in some gender identity rhetoric, some gender identity policy, which is obviously a very febrile issue, but one which doesn't ignite huge swathes of the population outside of the very heavily invested on either side of these arguments. I hope, in a way, I hope I'm wrong, because if they're ripping up the current schemes and the current systems simply to appease people uncomfortable with gender identity, people who don't believe in gender identity, then it would seem to me to be a case of potentially throwing a baby out with the bathwater. But what I don't know is how good the system currently is. I don't know whether you've, and I'm about to ask you that, so you need to tell me if you work in the system, if teachers in the system, does the system, with particular reference to educating children about dangers they may face and experiences they may have. So by that I mean threats in the context of predatory behaviour and potential abuse, but I also mean education in the sense of knowing what's what when the time comes for you to start having boyfriends and girlfriends, right? I think those are the two key platforms, aren't they? You want children to have enough knowledge to know what is wrong and what is not, and to know, I think the most horrible thing when you look into reports of child sexual abuse, and as you may know, both of my schools have seen people jailed as a consequence of what they did to my schoolmates, and indeed my main school, Ampleforth College, had its own section in the child sex abuse inquiry. So prevalent and so gross was the abuse being visited on the boys there, largely by monks, which adds a whole new dimension to the mess. But that's not the conversation for today, not really, although there may be one or two little nods back to my school days that are pertinent. But what interests me most, and what I think should interest government most, are, if you like, the unpleasant and the potentially pleasant sides of this issue. The unpleasant being making sure that children know what is and what is not appropriate or inappropriate. And then the potentially pleasant side of it is just knowing what's what when the time comes for you to have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. 9 minutes after 11 is the time. So here's the thing, right? And this is why I, for the first time in my life, I'm going to tell you that there's quite a good piece on the comment pages of the Daily Telegraph today. and it's by a writer called Gemma Lewis, who is concerned about what she describes as the contorted doctrines of gender ideology befuddling our young. And she thinks, as I do, that this whole scheme is designed to appeal to parents like her. But she goes on to, I think, endorse my baby bathwater theory by saying that pupils will be 13 or 14 before they have any discussion about specific sexual acts, about contraception, about abortion, about sexual violence, about sexually transmitted diseases. And across all year groups, teachers will only be required to tell children that gender ideology is contested if the dreaded subject comes up, which would leave lonely and confused children just as lonely and confused as they were before they went to a trusted adult to ask them to make them feel a bit less lonely than confused. She describes it as both a drastic overreaction and a cowardly fudge designed to mollify two quite different cohorts of of concerned parents. The middle-aged liberals like me, she writes, who think sex is tremendous but the whole gender thing has gone a bit far, and the religiously devout who don't want their children to be exposed to any of this filth. And I think it's one of the best articles I've read in this field, which makes it all the more remarkable that it is on the comment pages of the Daily Telegraph, where we normally turn for our unhinged headlines, and they very, very, very rarely let us down. So I want to focus on the second element of this, on the sex education of our children, not the attempts to mollify people who think, in Gemma Lewis's words, that the whole gender identity thing has gone too far. I want to focus on sex education for children. And I want to begin by asking you whether you, as a teacher or as a parent who pays particular attention to these matters, thinks that there was a problem with the existing curriculum. What I mean, ideally you teach it. I don't even know what it's called anymore. Is it not called PHSE anymore? Is it RSE? Do we know? Have we got anyone young enough to tell us what it's called now? Personal health and forgive me, I'm not doing that performative ignorance thing, and I'm certainly not going to pretend that the experiences I had 40 years ago. Crikey, it is nearly 40 years ago. Normally I do a little sum there when I say something like 40 years ago, and I think you're not that old. It was actually 39 years ago that I received my sex education from a man in a dress who'd taken a vow of celibacy, which has absolutely nothing to do with the story today or indeed with the broader issues. But I do want to know about the reality. It's RSE. So what does, I don't know, forgive me, I should probably have looked into this before we got on air, but what does RSE stand for? Is it religious? No, it can't be religious. What is the current situation, and is there anything wrong with it? As someone who teaches it, as someone who was taught it. So actually, if you're 18 or thereabouts, if you're in your late teens and you had RSE or PHSE, relationships and sex education is RSE. I think it's changed, Matt and Dula and quite a few other people sending me PHSE. I think it was PH or PHSE when one of my daughters did it. Maybe it was RSE when the other one did. But relationships and sex education, if you had it, what was it like? That's all I want to know to start with, because you've got a curious collection of Tories queuing up to tell us that there's a dire need for serious change, but they usually belong to things called like the common sense group and stuff like that. I worry that these people are neither qualified nor to be trusted when it comes to rewriting a curriculum for the sex education of children. So if you are a teacher in roughly this field, if you are a graduate of relationships and sex education classes in the last few years, if you, did also get under the PSHCE, Personal Social Health, Citizenship and Education, and the various acronyms that apply. But the key point is this: was there anything wrong with the sex education in our schools this time last year, or indeed this time last week? 0345 6060 973 is the question I would like you. It's the number that you need to answer the question that I'm asking you. Because my general feeling is that sex education is excellent, and a peculiarly interested, often supposedly religious parent has a problem with that. And I've always found those people quite scary for two reasons. Number one, they seem to be terrified of sex. All the talk of protecting children's innocence doesn't really apply when you acknowledge the prevalence of child sex abuse. And schools are places in which it is obviously particularly prevalent, potentially. And the other thing that I've never understood is if you've got a 9-year-old who needs to know whether an adult is telling them the truth when the adult claims that what they are doing is perfectly normal, but they better keep quiet about it anyway. And besides, if you did tell anyone, they wouldn't believe you, and it's your fault. If you listen to survivors of child sexual abuse, the guilt and the shame that they feel is enormous. And self-blaming as well is quite extraordinary. And that's the bit I've never understood. Why do you not want a child at least to know what is and what is not appropriate behaviour by an adult? Why would you not want anyone until they were potentially 14 years old? Because once you get to 14, you're in both sides of this story, aren't you? You are obviously going to be in need of proper information about what is and what is not appropriate behaviour by an adult towards you. But you're also likely to be experimenting with boyfriends and girlfriends. You're going to be 13 or 14 before they start teaching you about specific sexual acts, contraception, abortion. You might need an abortion at 14. Potentially you're going to need one, but you wouldn't have been taught about it yet. Sexual violence, sexually transmitted diseases. What is it? What are these people frightened of? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. So that's question number one. Why would anybody not want all children to be educated about what is and what is not appropriate behaviour in this field? You don't have to go into, grisly detail, but you need to go into enough detail to give them the power to say no, or the power to say that is not acceptable, that is not right. And and how can anyone justify making changes to a system without telling us what is wrong with the system as it stands? All right, there's two questions there. They're interlinked. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. How the heck can you protect a child from online pornography if you're not talking to them about specific sexual acts until they're 13 or 14? I hope you'd allow me to say I'm being uncharacteristically unclear in this analysis, because I haven't managed to fully articulate why I feel so uneasy. And I think part of the reason for that is probably that my own children are at the other end of this. And when we talked about it years ago, when I was younger, when you'd have quite odd evangelical Christians queuing up to claim that their children were being corrupted by sex education classes, I was at the other end of the journey. I was at the beginning of this journey, so I felt more of a personal investment in it. I think that might be why I can't better articulate a queasiness I have about the contributions of some of the people in this space. Gillian Keegan being unable in an interview this morning to provide any evidence for the problems she was claiming to be solving. If you can't provide any evidence, it's possible the problem doesn't exist. It's a bit like when that bloke popped up on Sky News talking about the BBC being biased. And Sophie Ridge said, do you have any examples of the BBC being biased? And his face was a picture, because they live in circles, these people, where these truths, these tropes are never questioned. They're not true. Unless you've got proof that the BBC is biased, you shouldn't really, as a government minister, be sitting on Sky News saying that the BBC is biased. Unless you've got proof as a senior Tory politician or even as an education minister. Unless you've got proof that they're teaching 73 different genders in school. And I don't really want to go down the gender road in this conversation. Unless you've got proof that there are problems, you probably shouldn't be claiming that the so-called solution is a necessity. 0345 6060973 is the number that you need. 20 minutes after 11 is the time. JH has written, is your criticism including Muslims and practicing Jews, or is it just Christians? I'm sorry, I thought my language was pretty clear. I talked about how when we had these discussions when my children were younger, it was evangelical Christians that would sort of queue up to tell me that they didn't want their children to be sexualized early or anything like that. But if you had a Jew or a Muslim or a Zoroastrian or a member of the Church of Pastor telling me the same thing, my reaction would obviously be exactly the same. The thing about being bigoted is that you always think everybody else is as well. So if you've got somebody claiming that their Muslim faith or their Jewish faith means that their children shouldn't be educated about what is sexual abuse and what is not, my reaction would be exactly the same as if they're from the Christian faith or no faith at all. It's because you respond differently to different ethnicities or different faiths that you think everybody else does. 21 minutes after 11 is the time. Let's get in on this one. 0345 6060973. It is 23 minutes after 11 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we're wondering why the Tories are tearing up sex education curricula and whether it's necessary. Emma sent me a message. I actually double-checked on this because I presumed that they were right. The message saying, I bet you... I want to get this right. I bet you dollars to donuts there's a Tufton Street or American-style foundation behind this final push. And an awful lot of the research being cited by the people behind it has come from Policy Exchange, which is an opaquely funded think tank that Rishi Sunak chose to give his speech in front of on Monday. But they also do a good job of explaining my queasiness is the word that I've gone for. They write, you feel uneasy because it is a regression on the same slippery slope as the reversal of Roe versus Wade in the United States. You feel the nausea of precognition. It feels like a pushback against progress, the way that it's being framed. And that should concern us all, I think. Lucy's in Chigwell. Lucy, what made you pick up the phone?
Oh, hello, James.
Hello, Lucy.
Sorry, I'm really sitting in my car because I don't want you to be able to hear all that awful traffic.
Okay.
Give me a second. James, what I wanted to say was, I used to deliver PHSE lessons when I was working in schools.
Okay.
And I didn't find them to be any issue. I found that they were quite timely and useful. And the way that I still believe that to be the case is my son has just turned 12 years old. He's in year 7.
Yes.
And he was approached by a year 10 boy outside of, around the complex of the school. The boy would try and talk to him, try and touch his shoulders and stroke his back. And then one day he asked my son for a sexual act.
Gosh.
But my son was 11 at the time. He's just turned 12. He didn't know what it was.
No.
Now, so he didn't say a word to anybody because he had no idea what it meant.
Right.
He just assumed it was just teasing.
Yeah.
So then he started his PHSE lessons and he was acting rather strange.
Oh.
So one day he wouldn't go to school and he was in tears and I said, what is going on?
Yes.
And, you chat with your child because you're trying to get him into school. And he just said, Mum, this boy has said this to me. He's been doing this since I started in September, but he said it once, but it's mostly trying to cuddle me.
Right.
He said, and now I've just said PHSE, I've just found out what it means. I'm like,
and that is, to use the language of the reporting this morning, he had a specific sexual act explained to him in PHSE class.
He had sex, so the boy asked for that.
Yeah.
So he had that explained.
And he
now, the reason
known.
I hadn't taught it early, the reason I hadn't taught it early is I try and follow the curriculum.
Okay.
So I don't want to teach my children anything too early because obviously it's really important. They don't have access.
You've got to put the line somewhere. I mean, you're not going to, I mean, but and that's why you trust the curriculum in a way. You think that
Well, I've worked in education, so I trust the curriculum because I feel like if he hadn't have had that, if he hadn't have found out 14, 15,
which is what the plan is. That means until they're 13 or 14, there must be no discussion about specific sexual acts. So he would have...
I mean, I know the signs. I used to be a safeguarding officer, so I know the signs. I know what to look for. But they weren't very noticeable. The only thing that was noticeable was he was avoiding his PHSE homework.
Right.
And he wouldn't go in on that day. That was all it was.
How did you? How did you? I hope you don't mind me asking, but how did you move forward? How did you?
Right, so I'm very lucky. I knew what to do, so I just reassured him, validated what he'd said, reassured him. I went straight to the safeguarding lead at the school, made the report. Obviously, I did it as a job, so I'm very lucky that I knew what to do.
Yeah.
And some people don't, and I can understand why some parents panic.
Yeah.
But my first thought was, for a Year 10 boy to do that, there could be two things going on. That Year 10 boy needs support, and he's been introduced to things that he isn't ready for, or he's predatory. So it turned out to be, or both. It turned out to be he had special needs. He hadn't been supported in that area, and he was confused about his own sexuality.
So he needed more education himself.
He needed support, and I actually asked for that. I said, if it turns out that that's true, can he have support?
Yeah.
And also, can my son have support? I gave my son the support he needed. He was back in school the next day.
That was what I was in. I mean, that is what I am also interested in. How did you? What was that conversation like, Lucy? What was that conversation with your boy like?
Okay.
Once he'd said, I know what he's asked me to do now. I didn't really know before because I'm 11. How did that conversation unfold?
Okay, well, I had to send my husband away because he was useless at it. So he went. I know he's doing a PhD in public health, but he couldn't handle it, so he was off.
Okay.
So I basically said, sometimes if people feel something towards you, an emotional attachment to you, sometimes they might want to be your boyfriend or girlfriend. Yeah. And he said, but Mum, he's a boy. Yeah. I said, I understand, darling, but boys do have boyfriends and boys do have husbands. And he said, oh, yeah, I know. I said, so for that boy, it wasn't unusual for him because he's attracted to boys.
Okay.
So we went through it and he was like, right, okay. I said, but he shouldn't have asked you because you're too young and he's too young. And he said, so what's the age? So we went through that. So I kept it very matter of fact. I keep it very matter of fact. And I think at the end of the day, he understands.
There's no mystique, is there? There's no mystique and there's no stigma and there's no shock value. It's a normal conversation that it seems to me you've handled perfectly. And was there a moment in this whole exchange where you could see him visibly relax, where you could almost see the burden he'd been carrying lifted off his shoulders, either by the act of revelation or by the conversation with you?
Yes, because the homework that he was to do was consent.
Right.
So he couldn't handle that, whereas I'm absolutely fascinated around this area of consent for children. Obviously, children can't consent, but you see my point.
I do, yes.
And so we were doing a poster on consent, and he couldn't even look at the poster. But what I said to him is, in life, whatever age you are, you can say no. You can say no, and you can tell an adult, I want to say no. And then you can tell someone you trust, someone, you've really got to have 5 people you can trust in your life as a child.
Yeah.
And he was like, so I can say no? I said, absolutely.
Of course you can.
And then when you're the right age or you're the correct age for this, you can say yes. Oh.
Yes, well, that's what I was trying to articulate earlier with the 2 elements of education. You need to know what's wrong, but you also need to know what's what later when you start having boyfriends and girlfriends. So,
of course, it's frightening.
Well,
I do not like Gillian. I'm not a fan.
No, Gillian Keegan, you mean the education secretary?
Julian Keegan, I'm not a fan, James.
Why are they doing it then? Why are they doing it when you've just highlighted the need, arguably, for having, in his case, 6 months earlier would have been helpful, not 3 years later.
The minute you find out about sex, you need to find out that can be with men or women. And then people start asking questions about LBG, and sort of.
And they want to keep that out. We're still subscribing to that old-fashioned idea that there's something wrong with it.
The second you get into that, you get into gender. And then as soon as you get into gender, they panic. Well, I've had the gender conversation with my son because we see somebody walking to school.
Well, he can't have it now at school.
No, but I've had to have it because my boy said to me, Mum, that boy there, he's got dress on. I think he's in our school because we've seen him.
Yeah.
So I've said, you know what? We need to have this chat, and we had a chat, and they were like, so that.
And no one was spooked. I mean, the contagion of homosexuality was one of the weirdest things I encountered on this program when I first started having these conversations, people said, I don't want my son to be taught about homosexuality because it might turn him gay. You get that a lot from religious people as well, and anyone who needs help. The question you ask of somebody who says that is when did you decide to be straight? When did you make the lifestyle choice to be heterosexual? And usually people's heads explode. They say, I didn't make a lifestyle. Well, then how would anybody make a lifestyle? But Lucy, for the record, well done, that mum from Louise is a text that sums up about quite a few, including one Irish listener who says, what a great mammy. I'm presuming that you're Irish. Lucy, thank you. And there it is, in one call. I think the whole sorry mess summed up by a mum who was there with the knowledge, the information and the education that was needed to steer her son through a potentially very difficult situation. And the Tories don't want those lessons to be taught in schools. Thomas Watts has your headlines. 11:36 is the time, and queasiness is the right word to describe my response to this story, because it does seem to be about the direction of traffic. Leaving aside the gender identity conversation, which has been incredibly difficult for an awful lot of people, but which barely touched. I mean, our last caller, I think, is a much more common experience. I heard Eddie Izzard on with Nick this morning, who said when I came out, nobody cared. It's just become a hugely inflated and febrile issue. But in terms of sex education for children, is this a step in the direction, in reverse gear? We don't want to teach children about being gay because we don't really like gays. You remember what Section 28 was? I just... Some of the personnel involved in this movement are, to my mind, a little suspect when it comes to that kind of zeal. 11:37 is the time. Ethan's in Bude in Cornwall. Ethan, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Hello, Ethan.
So I'm talking as a perspective of somebody that's taught sex education to a Year 3 class and a Year 5 class.
Okay.
Within the last 2 years.
Gosh.
So, firstly, to the last caller's point, talking about timing, with the curriculum that we follow, and I'm assuming that's probably across the board,
yes,
it's always taught at the end of the year.
Right.
So it's always when the children are at the last possible opportunity. They've done the year of growth in
yes,
that year,
yes,
and it's the last thing that we teach.
Okay.
And it's always the thing that when it comes about, teachers, even at this stage, get a little bit uneasy about it. People start talking in the staff room that they've got the sex ed coming up next term and things like that. So teachers are already pretty stressed about it anyway. And I think this just piles on the kind of lack of respect that I think teachers get, that their integrity is kind of called into question. They're professionals delivering information to children.
Yeah.
That's their job. It's not an ideology thing. We are teaching them the things that they need to be taught. No sexual acts are talked about in the years that I've taught them. And the big thing for me is periods for girls.
Right.
It's a huge thing that I covered in my Year 5 class, and it was covering all the different types of ways of handling periods when they come, because girls as young as 8 or 9 can get their periods. I've had that happen in my class.
Good Lord.
And they ask so many questions about it because some parents don't explain it to them. I never had a parent explain anything like this to me, and I'm 27. Like, I'm not an old person.
No, I hear you. What were you taught at school yourself? How different was your experience from theirs? 20 years apart.
Oh, I don't really remember it in primary.
No.
But I mean, I don't think I got very much from sex education.
Are there ever any problems? Do you ever have any parents who are unhappy, or children who are I don't know, sort of, I don't say traumatized, but you know what I mean. Does it ever throw up any unexpected problems that might speak to the need for change if we were looking for the reasoning behind Gillian Keegan's position?
I think I have had a couple of children that are uneasy about the things when they're mentioned, because one of the ways that we do a nice icebreaker is you tell me what you call these bits of the body.
Yes.
And then we all laugh about it, and it eases that tension, because they'd have heard different terminologies for things, and it's a nice way of going, okay, this is a safe space for us to express the things that we know and to build on that. And some of them get uncomfortable at these words, and that's fair enough. but it's about kind of reframing it in a positive way and giving them information. That's all it is. It's just information that they need to know so that they are not worried about things or they don't feel abnormal when things start to change in their body. A lot of it's just puberty stuff.
And that's why this is so weird, isn't it? Because you and the last caller both put a dial in my mind, which is information at this stage, and then you turn the dial up to the next stage and you need more information, and that's what they've done. They've moved the dial from say 11 or 12 to 13 or 14, which means that children will not, and this is after they've left your school, they're not going to be having any discussion about specific, because if you can menstruate, you can get pregnant. And if it's as a consequence of abuse, you're going to be confused and terrified in a million different ways, but you're not going to be taught about contraception or abortion until you're potentially 14 years old. I don't understand it, Ethan. What are they trying to keep at bay?
I think they are trying to rally a base of people that are ignorant on these issues. These are people that aren't embracing the new ways of thinking about sex or the ways of thinking about gender. There are new studies, there are new ways of thinking about these things, that they were taught things very differently 40, 30 years ago,
yes,
that they still want to be the case. But that's not the way that science or biology work. Like, we've discovered new things. There are,
My friend Emma puts it like this. Listen to this, you'll like this. Right-wing reactionaries only want awkward baby-making sex between two Christians, and everyone has to be very embarrassed about the whole business.
That's not fun for anyone.
There's some truth in that, isn't it? It's why they also complain about birth control, women in the workplace, girls going to college. The list, that's why I'm queasy, because it feels like a thin end of a very ugly wedge, doesn't it?
I think
potentially.
If young girls don't understand their own bodies, then they are easier to control.
If young girls don't understand their own bodies, then they are easier to control. And some of the most impassioned advocates of women being controlled are women. The trad wife movement in America, for example, is absolutely chilling. And I just see links. I could be completely wrong. I think no bones about that at all. I could be completely wrong, but it just seems to me that they are on the same team as some of the people pushing this stuff in our media and in this country. 11:43 is the time. Nicole is in Durham. Nicole, what would you like to say?
God, this is frustrating, isn't it?
I think it is, yes. I think it is.
Hell.
Go on.
Right, so as a mother of a 3-year-old,
yes,
right, am I going to be trying to shield her from all of these different things? No, because that then opens the risk of what we're going to do, shut down the internet. These kids are going to find it.
Sounds like something that's been framed in the 19th century, never mind in the internet age.
It's insane. So they're going to find it, like your earlier caller, they're going to find it in school.
And they're not going to know what's going on, and they're going to be confused.
And also, so I think the difference is, the danger of that is that then instead of teaching, they're confusing innocence with ignorance. And there's a huge difference between the two. Like, I teach Posey about all sorts of things, and she's 3 years old, yes, because it's important she has a positive representation of, she needs to understand what consent is.
And when of course, exactly that. And it matters even, I mean, the NSPCC do guidance for really young children as well, because you need to know. You need to know. What are they scared of? What are you hearing? What are they trying to keep at bay?
Loss of innocence. That's why I think they're confusing ignorance with innocence.
Oh, that's
and I think that, and they're not the same thing. Posey is an innocent. She's 3 years old. My friend's having a baby, so I was on Instagram the other day, and I was showing her this Instagram account where it shows women giving birth, and she said, "Oh no, Posey, don't look at this." I said, "Lynn, if you can give me a more natural instance than a woman giving birth and a reason not for her to see this," I said, "Tell me. I'm open."
So she was what did Lynn say? What did Lynn say?
She was like, "Oh, fair enough. Yeah." I was like, "I'm going to tell her."
I hadn't thought of it like
that. It's the most, it's beautiful.
It's quite English, this, Nicole, I think. I wonder what French people or Southern European people listening to this think about us. They must think we're a bit weird.
I think, but the danger of it is, the reason it puts, I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but for me it's terrifying. Because as a woman, the sexual violence pyramid.
Yes.
It feeds into that.
I think
because
it does.
when they're not going to get their education from this, where are they going to go? They're going to go to porn. And what do we see on porn? Women being dominated, women doing nothing but being at the whim of men's pleasure.
This must be normal, because this is all I've seen. This is all I've heard about. I haven't even had a conversation about normal sex in school until I'm 14. It's just well,
it's absolutely petrifying. And then obviously this then permeates and bleeds into other areas of society where the pyramid comes in. So it's not just about, we don't want to talk about these tricky subjects because they're a bit awkward. Yeah. It's going to be like how our future men view our women. Yes. It's insane.
It comes from both ends. It comes from the way men view women and what women think is normal. And if they're not being taught it, but some parents are not going to know that they need to be doing this. They're not going to be very good at doing it, and they're stopping it from happening in school. Where's the win here? Who benefits? Where is the win? Who comes out of this better off than they went into it? Who's going to be better served by the system under this rule than they were under the rules? That's it. Rarely do you get such unanimity on a conversation like this. But, there's probably a reason why things like teenage pregnancies are at an all-time low. 11:46 is the time. We've got Natasha Clark bringing us up to date with this Keir Starmer speech, which people are getting very excited about on social media. And we will catch up also with Dale Vince, the sustainable energy guru. Find out what he thinks of Keir Starmer's big energy programme, and also, hopefully, a little update on his battles with the Daily Mail. It's 11:47. It's 10 to 12, 10 minutes to Mystery Hour. Mystery Hour minus 10, T minus 10 on the way shortly. Your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction not ordinarily available anywhere else on your radio dial. I don't know that we'll have time for any more calls on this, but I suspect it's a subject to which we will return. How far away are we from going back to people telling me on the phone, it's Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve? That's why I'm queasy. It just seems to me that there are people in the Tory party keen to set the direction of traffic who are very much of that ilk. Anyway, enough for now, because Natasha Clark is in Pursfleet in Essex, where Keir Starmer has just given a speech which seems to have gone down rather well in some quarters. Natasha, what did you make of it all?
James, I really liked it. I thought it was very flash, very swish. Keir Starmer seemed pretty confident. He was calm. They had their serious faces on. This was a government in waiting. That's exactly what the message he wants us to take from his speech today. All of the shadow cabinet sitting loyally behind Keir Starmer. We heard from Angela Rayner, Rachel Reeves, Wes Streeting, and a number of business voices and just regular old Joe public like you and me, James. People that could potentially switch their vote from the Conservative Party to Labour as well. There was a couple of those that spoke about why they felt that now was the time to vote for Labour. And yes, each of the shadow cabinet, where they've clearly been told to wear something red, because all of them were sporting some red socks from Mike Tapp, our favourite Labour candidate for Dover and Deal. We had red dresses on from Bridget Phillipson, the shadow education secretary as well. So they all got the memo, apart from Rachel Reeves. Actually, she was in a green suit, so she clearly did not see that memo. But yes, I thought it was a really good speech, brought together basically everything, all of the messages that Labour are trying to say under these new 6 key pledges. They don't like to say the word pledges, no. Labour today, but that is exactly what they are. He took his sleeves off, he took his jacket off, he rolled his sleeves up, and he's trying to portray this image to us that he is the guy that's now ready for power. So these 6 promises he's revealed to the people today, they will form a key part of the Labour manifesto, of his main offer to the public. And we're here obviously in Essex because Labour believe that that's going to be one of their key battlegrounds to try and turn red in the next election. And he said today that he knows that this journey ahead won't be easy, but he is ready with what he calls Labour's first steps for change.
1 card, 6 steps, in your hand, a plan to change the country. This is a message that we can take to every doorstep across the country. Every doorstep across the country. And make that argument. Decline is not inevitable. Politics can make a difference. Britain will have a better future. And you can choose it with Labour. Stop the chaos with Labour. Turn the page with Labour. Return politics to service with Labour. And with patience, with determination, with these first steps, we can rebuild our country with Labour. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
And James, look, these 6 priorities that the Labour Party are revealing today, he says they're focused on what the people's priorities are. He's talking about NHS, education, the economy, and for the first time he's putting immigration, really interestingly, at the heart of that offer. And we saw the makings of that last week when I was in Dover for that other speech that the Labour leader was making about immigration and small boats. But critics say, look, these 6 promises, they're really similar to the Tories' 5 promises. And I put that to him. It's fair to say, James, he was very unimpressed with the idea of being compared to the Conservatives.
The government says they're going to stop the boats. More people have come by boat this year, 8,000, than any other year. That is a record failure. A record failure because they're going for a gimmick, not a serious plan. The government says they're going to get the waiting list down. They're going up. Everybody knows. We talk about the numbers. Nearly 8 million appointments and operations needed. That's massive. That's never happened in the history of our country since we've had the NHS. We've never been in this position. This is fundamentally different to the government. But the difference is also political. Because I'm not prepared to do gimmicks. I'm only prepared to do the hard yards of serious change with a serious plan for 5 or 10 years of change in this country with the first steps that are needed to bring it about. And that is a political difference between us, a seriousness, if you like, about politics. The rhetorical flourishes are great. The massive promises are great. But if you don't deliver on them, you do the very thing that we've been talking about, which is beat the hope out of people. So we have to rebuild that, and that's what this is about.
So completely slapping down any accusation that he's trying to woo over the Tories and former Tory voters, which obviously is exactly what he's trying to do. But he's trying to say that he is different enough to them. But look, this Tony Blair-style pledge card that they've whipped out for supporters and for journalists here at this event, it's a tiny little sort of credit card style size, fold-out little card with all of the key pledges on. I mean, look at the picture that Labour have put out today of Sir Keir Starmer. He's got his tie on, he's got his shirt sleeve rolled up, this black and white picture. It looks almost identical to the pictures that we saw of Tony Blair back in 1997 on some of those. There is absolutely no way around it. He is very much trying to emulate the essence of Tony Blair here today. And so, yes, I and another journalist attempted to try and get him on this. And just, do you feel like Tony Blair? I tried to ask him, he dodged that question, but another journalist tried to pin him down on this. Are you just a copy of Tony Blair? He said no, that it's very, very different to 1997 and the country is facing very different problems now.
The first thing I'd say about Tony Blair, which is more important than whether he took his tie off, is he won 3 elections in a row. And what Blair did in 97 is what Wilson did in 64 and Attlee did in 45, which was to take the Labour Party from opposition into power. We've only done it 3 times, effectively. And the thing that unites them was the ability to glimpse the future and to persuade people to go on that journey to a changed future.
Keir Starmer speaking impulsively earlier today. Natasha Clark, LBC's political editor, thank you for that excellent thumbnail sketch of what went on. One man listening with particular interest would have been Dale Vince, founder, of course, of Ecotricity and one of Labour's biggest donors. Fair to say clean energy is your political raison d'etre, Dale. Tell us what you make of Great British Energy, this new publicly owned champion.
Well, I think it's a great idea. You know, for too long, we've been selling off our vital national infrastructure to foreign owners who don't really care about services here, just siphoning profits from our economy and our country. And the renewable energy that we need to build to get to 100% powered that way to energy independence can be in public ownership. We can have the benefits of that. And I think it's a great idea for that to happen.
Big windfall taxes as well on oil and gas companies. That's something. Well, you're going to welcome all of this, aren't you? It's. I presume that you've been involved in formulating some of it.
But, you know, the thing about windfall taxes is we should cut them off at source. So right now, half of our gas comes from the North Sea and you know, the North Sea is in decline. It can work for us as part of our transition to green energy. But meanwhile, we shouldn't allow global markets to set the price of it. In the energy crisis just 2 years ago, we paid 10 times more for that North Sea gas than we needed to, just because of global markets. We should cap the price of North Sea gas. When we do that, we prevent windfall profits, and we don't need to worry about whether a windfall tax has holes in it or not.
And finally, the National Wealth Fund, Dale, what's that about?
Well, I think that's about putting our money into something sensible and for the long term, so that in the future generations of Britain are benefiting from that. If you look what they've done in Norway with the money they made from selling their fossil fuels, they've created a wealth fund, a sovereign wealth fund, and it benefits everybody in the country. We squandered the money from our North Sea, and the new Labour government won't allow that to happen with renewable energy.
Dale Vince, always a pleasure. Well, I have you, and I'm going to be late for the news, so I won't have you for much longer. But speaking of news, when we did Full Disclosure together, you spoke a little bit about the fact that you are one of the few people who can actually afford to take legal action against newspapers like the Daily Mail when they get up to their tricks. What's the latest on that?
Well, the latest is that they've caved in. We mounted a legal challenge. They libelled me in respect of Hamas and some fake piece of video concocted by another organisation. They backed down, agreed to pay my costs, published an apology, and crucially, they're paying damages, which I'm going to donate to a Palestinian charity.
6 more cases, I think, on the boil as well at the moment.
3 Tory MPs, 1 peer, GB News, and actually the leader of the Reform Party. There's quite a list.
Well, keep us posted, won't you, Dale?
I will.
Take care. Dale Vince, the founder, of course, of Ecotricity and a sustainable energy guru, I think it's fair to say, being very warm in his welcome for Keir Starmer's Great British Energy proposals. The time now is 12 noon. Up next, Mystery Hour.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Mystery Hour with James O'Brien.
4 minutes after 12 is the time, and your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction not ordinarily available anywhere else on your radio dial is upon us once again. You know the number by now. You may not know how this works if you are relatively new to the programme. It's a rather different hour from the other 14 that we spend together every week, 15 if you include the Full Disclosure podcast, of course. But it's a lot of fun. Someone will ring in with a question to which they believe there must be an answer, and then somebody will ring in with the answer. The only rule is that you're not allowed to be boring, although, to be honest, we've been riding roughshod over that for the longest time, and you're not allowed to look anything up, because that would make a mockery of the whole practice. It has to be knowledge you have, which means when I say, what's your qualifications, you could say anything from, well, I have a PhD in the relevant subject matter, James, or, oh, I saw it on the telly last night. Yeah. There's a prize these days. You get a Mystery Hour board game, which is a beautiful bit of kit, actually. Lovingly assembled, carefully curated, and profoundly entertaining. Fun for all the family. Find out more about the board game at mysteryhour.co.uk. Buy it, indeed, at mysteryhour.co.uk. And get the terms and conditions for the competition under which you could win one today by being my favourite contributor at lbc.co.uk. And I think that is it, really. But the rest, you can just suck it and see, as they say. 5 minutes after 12 is the time. Chris is in Bexley, not in Brixham. Chris, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on.
Why is Earth represented on maps and globes orientated north up?
Why would what? What? Why wouldn't it be?
Well, why is it not south up? Why is it not east up? It's all relative, isn't it? We were just floating through space. So who's decided that it's north up?
I don't understand the question.
So when you look at, say, you go on Google Earth right now.
Yeah.
You go on Google Maps. Why is it north up? Why are we looking at it that way?
Oh,
who's decided that?
Oh, well, I mean, whoever did the first maps.
Who was that?
Well, the Mappa Mundi in Shrewsbury Cathedral is one of the earliest known maps. I imagine the Sumerians probably had some local maps, but in terms of mapping the whole world, you'll be going pretty much. It would depend on the history of naval travel, and therefore it was probably. I mean, why?
If you go to the Far East, they had it east up. If you go to the British Museum, I think some of the early Islamic
that's your answer then.
Up.
That's your answer then, isn't it? So the maps you see are maps from the Western Hemisphere, the Western world. So they've put the north at the top. But if you were if you'd grown up somewhere else in the world. I mean, it's also the same reason why the United Kingdom's usually smack in the middle of a world map when we go to school. I bet it's not smack in the middle of a world map if you're at school in Ulaanbaatar, is it? It's just geographical relativism is what it is.
I'll wait for a steward's inquiry.
Well, there won't be a steward's inquiry because I haven't given myself a round of applause yet. But what else could it? But what else could it be? Hereford Cathedral. That's a steward's inquiry, not Salisbury Cathedral. Hereford Cathedral. If you want to go and have a look at Mapamundi. So yeah, I mean, I won't take a round of applause for that. But I would be very surprised if the answer doesn't involve it. Well, it depends on where the map was made. And so, but you're right to point out it's a bit silly, because we all think it's some sort of scientific observation, whereas in fact it's just going to be a sort of geographical relativism. So that's 7 minutes after 12 is the time. Thank you, Chris. Just jot that one down. Maps. Dave is in Southampton. Dave, question or answer?
Question, please.
Yes.
I was in Southampton town the other week with my daughter, and
that sounds like a song. Go on.
There's a wall that was graffitied by a load of American servicemen before they headed out to fight in D-Day.
Yes.
And my daughter said, why is it called D-Day?
It's a very good question.
And I don't know.
I think I know the answer to this, but when I tell you what the answer is, we will both think that I must be wrong.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
You want to know what the D stands for?
Yeah.
In D-Day?
Yeah.
It stands for day.
Really?
It's Day-Day.
Day-Day.
Day-Day. Day.
Well, you're definitely right. I do think we must be wrong.
Yeah, I told you would. I think I must be wrong as well. It's Day-Day.
Day-Day.
Yeah.
Okay, then my question becomes why?
Well, you're not allowed to do that,
no,
unfortunately. I can't remember why. That's why I know. That's why I said that we'll both think I'm wrong, because I couldn't remember why. It's called Day-Day. But it is day. Deed stands for day. Day-Day.
Right.
I think. I'm going to take a round of applause.
Are you really?
Well, I'd like your scepticism, Dave, and frankly, I respect it. I respect it. Can I take a little one?
Okay.
Go on.
A smattering.
Yeah, but I think I'm right. But
okay.
But someone, I'm going to bend the rules, Dave, and I'm going to allow someone to ring in and tell us why it's D-Day. D-Day.
Well, that's very good of you.
Oh, well, you're right. It's for your daughter, really, not for you.
Well, it is, yeah. It's amazing.
Nice one, Maisie. Thank you, Dave. 9 minutes after 12 is the time. D-Day. D-Day Dave. That's D-Day Dave there in Southampton. Dave D-Day. Day Dave. It's only me that finds that stuff amusing, isn't it? Jack's in Bedford. Jack, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on.
Why do we associate rabbits with eating carrots? So, like, in fictional stories, rabbits quite like a carrot, but naturally you don't see rabbits bouncing around in the wild with a bunch of carrots.
What a wonderful question. Well, I mean, I'm going to go for Beatrix Potter.
Yeah, well, I know it definitely comes from fictional stories and things, but what is it about carrots that someone thought, I know, a rabbit would love that?
Well, Peter Rabbit.
That's what I thought.
Used to steal, what was the gardener called? Can you remember his name?
Oh, I can't think of the
But what came first, Peter Rabbit or Bugs Bunny?
No idea.
Probably Peter Rabbit, yeah? I mean, the cartoons, colour television. So I wouldn't be surprised if it all goes back to Peter Rabbit and Mr. Has he got a G in it? Someone's going to text me in a minute. So that's where it would be. That's where it would be.
Yep.
But I mean, I can't take that as an answer because I'm thinking out loud. But so what you will have is story. Mr. McGregor, I told you it had a G in it. Mr. McGregor. What it will be. Thank you to Sam for that. It will be a story that was so popular that the behaviour in it's a bit like Long John Silver.
Yes.
And I think that it's all down to one portrayal of Long John Silver by the actor Charles Laughton. That is why we all think that pirates say "arr" and talk like that. There's nothing in history to suggest that pirates had that particular way of talking, but Charles Laughton played it that way in one production of Treasure Island, and it has become completely omnipresent in the same way, I think, that Peter Rabbit stealing Mr. McGregor's carrots has become a sort of omnipresent trope for carrots and rabbits.
I do wonder if our pet rabbits, when they see us getting carrots, I think, oh, for God's sake, not another one.
They don't dislike carrots, do they? No, they don't dislike a carrot, but they're like the rest of us. They'd like to mix things up a bit of cucumber maybe, or maybe some fruit. I don't know. But I like that question. I like that question a lot, Jack. In fact, you are in contention for the board game.
Can I also just say another thing quick before I go?
Well, no, not really, no.
It's more of a statement to you.
Well,
less of a question.
Okay, then.
I don't want to say thank you for talking about mental health on the radio, because it's really pushed me to start therapy, and that's made a massive difference in my life.
Fantastic, Jack. It will only get better. And thank you for saying that out loud as well, because that might reach someone else who'll think, do you know what? Maybe I will make that call. Maybe I will do that thing. Thank you. Robert Newton, not Charles Lawton. Everyone's a bloody pedant today. Thank you, Jack. Steve, Benfleet, question, answer.
It's a question, James. How you doing?
Very well, Steve. Carry on.
My question was, have the northern and southern lights ever met at the equator?
It's two questions very similar, but the map one and this one, I don't... What do you mean? I mean...
So basically the northern lights obviously came very south last Friday.
Yeah.
And
they did. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Lanzarote.
And
there was... Lanzarote, the Canary Islands. And then obviously the Southern Lights, obviously lesser known, obviously because there's less landmass down there. But I just wonder if there's ever been an event in history where there's been such a big solar storm that actually the Northern and the Southern Lights have met at the equator.
Wow. Well, actually, that's quite a good question now that you've explained it a bit better. Could you really see them in Lanzarote?
Yeah, there's been photos of.
Did you see the people?
Up on the mountains.
Did you see the fellow who ran out of his house because he could see purple lights in the sky, and he ran towards them thinking he was going to see the aurora borealis, and it turned out to be a travel lodge?
No,
it's a true story. Look, you've seen the travel lodges have the purple lighting. No, it's on the BBC. It must be true. Thank you, Andy. The Northern Lights, Southern Lights, have they ever met in the middle? Someone should write a song about that. Steve, not Andy, sorry. Andy's up next. Andy's in Basingstoke. Andy, question or answer?
Hi, Jim, lad. I've got a question for you.
It was Robert Newton, not Charles Lawton. I'm glad we've cleared that up. Carry on.
Just an easy question, I think.
Yes.
What's the origin of a deck of playing cards?
Well, does it not all start with the tarot?
I've no idea. That's why I asked the question.
I thought someone had already... I think this is in the board game, Andy. I think someone's already done this one.
I haven't got to that question yet, Jim.
No, I know. I'm not saying you should have done. You can't be expected to read every card in the board game before ringing in, but I'm saying I should be able to remember.
Okay.
But I shall try. Well, where do they come from? Because they're everywhere, aren't they? All over the world.
Yeah.
We like that question, even though we think we've already answered it. Andy, you take care. It's 12:15.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James O'Brien. Call 0345 6060 973.
I said it was one of those days. Just something happens and you just feel the need to correct every little tiny mistake I make, don't you? Well, it's not big and it's not clever. It was a Premier Inn, apparently, Emma tells me. John's written Premier Inn, you muppet, not a travel lodge. It's a bit strong, John. It's an easy mistake to make, isn't it? I always get my Premier Inns mixed up with my travel lodges, but it is, of course, the Premier Inn that has the purple branding, as Brian puts it from Crieff. Funny the stuff you pick up on, isn't it? I ask really important, serious questions and I get butt kiss in my inbox, and then I accidentally misgender a travel lodge as a Premier Inn, and you're all over me like a rash. It's absolutely ridiculous. And there's no need for a Stewart's inquiry. Let's get back to... I like that question about carrots and rabbits. I have to say, I don't know why that one has tickled me so much. Why do we always say... I mean, rabbits like radishes. A few people are telling me that Peter Rabbit was more of a radish and a lettuce fan than a carrot fan, so it may not be that this one goes back to Beatrix Potter. Why do we always associate carrots with rabbits? What is the D in D-Day? I've kind of answered that, but we are happy to take a stronger answer. Why do our maps always have the north at the top? And have the Northern Lights and the Southern Lights ever met? And where do playing cards come from? What's the origin of playing cards, modern playing cards? Tony's in Shepperton. Tony, question or answer?
Question, James.
Carry on, Tony.
So Sunday is the last day of the Premier League football season.
Yes.
It can only be won by either Arsenal or Man City.
Yes.
They're both playing at the same time.
Yes.
And they're both playing at home, so 200 miles apart.
Oh, yeah.
After the game, the trophy will be presented to the team who's won the Premier League.
I can see where you're going with this. I can see where you're going with this.
The trophy during the game. Yeah. What's the logistics of getting it to the right ground at the right time?
I can't tell you that at this point, but I can tell you that when Kidderminster Harriers played West Ham in the FA Cup season before last, the FA Cup was at Kidderminster Harriers.
Was it?
Yeah. We haven't really got the facilities, so it was in a sort of little annex off the kitchen, and you could go in and have your photograph. You could go in and have your photograph taken with proper security guards. They were quite moody, actually. They weren't armed or anything, but you certainly wouldn't be able to pick it up and do a pose with it or anything like that. Helicopters, maybe. Do you think helicopters? Do you think they keep it smack in between the two grounds? So it's at the Etihad. City are at the Etihad. Are Arsenal at home?
Yes.
So it's you need what's smack in between Manchester and London? Birmingham.
So it occurred to me that it could be one or two things.
Go on.
There's a helicopter in Birmingham, and it goes to the appropriate ground. Although landing a helicopter at a football ground while there's a match on is probably not that straightforward.
That's very true.
The other possibility is there's two trophies. And I don't know.
They have a kind of trophy. That's probably it, isn't it? A dummy trophy is more likely than a helicopter, because, as you say, where are they going to land a helicopter? A lot of people on the inbox are saying helicopter, but as you say, where are you going to land it? They can't drop it out of a helicopter, can't lower it to the ground, can they, in the car park or something?
Well, you'd see it happening.
You'd think there would be footage.
These things live on TV. There'd be a sort of, as you say, there'd be a box being lowered down onto the centre of the pitch or something spectacular.
I mean, let's be honest, Tony. They might as well just leave it in Manchester.
Yeah, but,
That's not. I mean, what are the odds? What are the odds? Yeah, it is quite a big gamble, and of course, on other days, it might not be. I mean, if it could be, if they were equal on points, it would be much more of a conundrum. I like that. Okay, you're on. Where will the cup be? At kick-off on Sunday, because they all kick off at exactly the same time. The jeopardy is magnificent on the last day of the season. Thank you, mate. I like that question. Margaret's in Soho. Margaret, question or answer?
An answer, please.
Carry on, Margaret.
Okay, it's about the maps.
Oh, yes.
Okay. He was asking about why maps are generally north-south.
Yes.
As opposed to east-west.
Well, the maps that we see.
Well, maps, generally speaking, if you want a world map, a map of the entire globe, a wall map, projecting a 3D image onto a 2D surface is going to has its own issues. But anyway, generally, the Earth spins about its axis. So you want your equator in the middle.
Yes.
And, I mean, the point he was making about why is it going through Europe as opposed to any other part of the surface. Well, of course, it's our maritime history. The Greenwich Meridian is 0 degrees, so that's sets the time for the world. It was very nearly Paris.
Was it?
It was very nearly coached in Paris many years ago, but it's universally been accepted that Greenwich is the prime meridian. So you would have your navigation going degrees east or degrees west, and it would make sense if you have it making a wall map to have your date line in the middle of the Pacific, because it's not cutting down through major land masses where the population is. It's just open ocean and a few atolls. So for the purposes of a wall map, that would make sense where you split your map if you wanted to make a wall map.
So I mean, it's got more to do with the Greenwich Meridian than anything else.
Yes,
because
and the axis of spin
and the empire and the way that we spread our kind of stuff all over the world.
Well, yeah,
what would a map in Saudi look like?
Navigation.
What would a map in Saudi? What would a map in Saudi Arabia look like? Or do we know?
Well, it depends on the scale. If you can look at the Earth, and if you can try and imagine it as a series of maps of just Post-it notes stuck on it all over, depending on the scale.
No, I get it. Qualifications?
Yeah. I used to be a cartographer back in the day, but also this thing about north-south.
Yes.
The Earth is, because we have a molten iron core, pretty much, that acts as a dynamo as we spin, which makes us like one gigantic magnet, which is why we get the aurorae at the poles, because that's it's solar particles that are reacting with the Earth's atmosphere at the poles. So, but the magnetic north is a movable feast.
Yes. We're going a little bit off piste now, Margaret.
Yeah.
I mean, you have actually answered the question, and this is the most popular feature on British radio, so there are an awful lot of people waiting to contribute. I mean, I'm personally fascinated.
Right, okay. But just saying that sometimes the north poles, the magnetic poles flip.
Yes.
And they have done many times throughout throughout the Earth's history.
History.
Yes, so sometimes,
When did you cease to be a cartographer?
Oh, many years ago. I used to make maps for the Air Force. But,
how exciting. Yeah. I can only offer you a round of applause. I feel that you deserve more, Margaret. But there it is. Thank you. Cheerio. Engine is in Catford. Engine, question or answer?
It's a question, please, James.
Carry on.
I'm not actually sure how to ask the question.
Let's just try. Let's just try.
So basically, I was in hospital last week for I've got a problem with my spine.
I'm sorry
I've got a fat nerve.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I've had it for a few years.
Oh dear.
So I had an appointment with what I thought was a doctor.
Yeah.
But he was a surgeon.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to know what's the difference between not the job as such, but how comes a surgeon isn't a doctor?
A surgeon is a doctor.
Apparently not.
Well, he is.
I actually rang up a couple of days ago to make a tweak with my appointment.
Yeah.
And I asked for doctor and then his name.
Yeah.
And the reception said, Mister. I said, no, doctor. And she just kept saying, Mister.
Yeah, but that's like a promotion. So once you become a consultant, and in this case, a surgeon and a consultant, you become known as Mister.
But why? I mean, surely
it's a promotion. No. It's weird, but it's just true.
I mean, I would respect you more if you were Dr. James O'Brien as opposed to Mr. James O'Brien.
Yeah, well, you go Mr. Doctor, Mister. It's weird, but remember that if you're in a hospital environment, everyone's a doctor except the Misters. So the Misters are senior to the doctors. It's a specialist doctor. So I mean, well, I'm not here to justify it, Engine. I'm here to explain it.
I'm trying to understand it.
It's because otherwise, how would you know who the consultants were if everyone was still a doctor?
Well, because I'm more nervous about having someone going into my spine that's a Mister rather than a doctor.
Well, then you're being silly because he's a senior doctor. You become a consultant, you get called Mister. It's a respect. It's a more senior assignation.
That's exactly it. Exactly it. I would assume because Mister is everyone.
No, it's not. It's not. It's not the doctors. It's not the. So look, there's only two types of doctor in a hospital, right? The doctors and the Misters, and the Misters are senior to the doctors, even though they're doctors.
I get it, but I don't get it.
No, you get it, but you don't like it. I'm not here to make you happy. I'm here to enlighten you.
That's exactly what he said to me.
Is it?
Well, because he offered me, I asked for an alternative to surgery, and he said, you just want me to make it go away. I said, well, yes.
Yeah.
But you don't want me to fix it. Well,
I see. So all surgeons would be Mister.
Right.
So that is it.
To me,
it might go back.
It
might go back, and I don't know about this because this wouldn't explain it. Now, don't be nervous. I promise you, the Mister is more senior to the doctor. All right, full stop, hand on heart.
Okay.
But if you were to go back to the sort of 17th century, the doctors were the ones that had all the learning. Even though most of it was Rolex, they used to analyse your urine and take blood from leeches, and they'd do you a horoscope before they did an operation on you. And they were the ones that were the physics, they were called, the physics that would prescribe potions.
So they're basically the architects or the engineers, and then the builder is the surgeon.
No, because the surgeon was an inferior position. Usually a barber would double up as a surgeon. They were called barber surgeons. So I suspect that the roots of this, I'm making it even more confusing just because I can. I suspect the roots of this go back to when the barber surgeon was the inferior to the doctor. So the Mister was an inferior to the doctor. But because medicine has evolved and the surgeon has become a much more specialised a practitioner than the doctor, the Mr. has sustained, even as the Mr. has overtaken the doctor. That is one of the best answers I've ever given. I really hope it's true.
I was honestly sitting there thinking, like, how are you actually saying this stuff out? Do you actually know, or are you just guessing it?
No, I know that bit about doctors because it features in a book that I'm reading at the moment, The Barber Surgeons and the Physics, as they would have been called. I'm reading about the Queen Elizabeth I had a Portuguese doctor, physic, not surgeon, who was executed as a consequence of a sort of made-up assassination plot. But the barber, someone needed their leg chopping off. That would be a barber surgeon. So the medics that followed an army would be more barber surgeons than actual doctors. The doctors were a more academic and rarefied grouping. Yeah, I've got this a bit wrong in terms of you'll have non-surgical consultants who are doctors. So surgical so I don't know all of it, but I know for a fact that your surgeon is a hyper-qualified doctor. Not less qualified.
Have they studied more than
Yes.
Right, okay.
So you can put yourself in his hands.
Well, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to ring back to, because I've chickened out of the surgery.
I think female. You've chickened out of the surgery because you thought he was a junior person.
No, because it's my spine.
Right, yeah, well, it is risky.
They want to shave my spine, basically. So.
Holy moly. Well, good luck, mate.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah, cheers.
When I said barber surgeon, I didn't mean that sort of shaving. That obviously.
I know, but you actually gave me sweat as you were saying it.
Yeah, I bet I did. I wouldn't have said that if I'd known the full details of your prognosis, mate. Obviously, I just sort of waded in there with my 17th century historical knowledge.
That's okay.
Well, good luck. Let us know how you get on, won't you?
I will do. Good. I've actually won the board game previously, so I might play that while I'm in hospital.
That's a great idea. Take it on the ward. I said take it on the ward. Get everyone involved. Spread the word. Take care, Engine. 12:31 is the time. Amelia Cox has your headlines.
Mystery Hour with James O'Brien. This is LBC.
12:34 is the time. We've done the maps. The D-Day needs kind of. Why is D-Day? It's called Day. What? Just explain it. Why do rabbits and carrots go together like horse and carriage? Have the Northern Lights and the Southern Lights ever met in the middle? What's the origin of playing cards? And on Sunday, where will the actual cup be when Arsenal and Manchester City start their games at opposite ends of the country, with only those two clubs capable of lifting it at full time? I got a lot of the doctor stuff wrong. A lot. Flipping out. Who knew so many doctors were listening? No wonder the waiting lists are so long. So that is so you start off from a bad position there, having offended all the doctors who've got in touch to tell me the mistake, and then I've insulted them even more by pretending that them having the radio on in the background is somehow a cause of waiting list. But it was also quite funny, wasn't it? Who knew so many doctors were listening to the programme? No wonder the waiting lists are so long. But the central bit was right. The bit, addressing Engine's question was actually correct. So I don't think that we need a crash course in who gets called Mr., Mrs., Doctor. I don't think we do. But, only time will tell. So my apologies for that. I obviously got a lot of it wrong. Also women surgeons. It doesn't matter. But what Engine needed to know, he now knows. Stu's in Plymouth. Stu, question or answer?
Hello, James. I've got an answer for you on D-Day.
Thank you, Stu. Carry on.
Right, you're right. The D does stand for day, but it's not. That's not the reason why it's called D-Day. When you're doing military planning for operations, you have to have, or we use something called a sync matrix, which is queuing up different units that have different objectives to achieve certain things in time and space.
Yes.
So the landings were going to happen on that day, the 6th of June. So that was D-Day.
Yes.
Say, for example, they needed to leave the southern coast of UK a day before D-Day. That would be D-1.
D-1 day. Just D-1.
Just D-1, yeah. And we also have things called H hour. So if we had to land on the beaches at 7 o'clock, that would be H hour. If we had to leave the ships at 6 o'clock, that would be H-1, and so on. So it's all to do with planning, getting things queued up to happen at a certain time at a certain location to ensure that the operation runs smoothly and to time.
And T as well. T for time, as you say. T, D, and H.
Yeah.
So this one just became so every operation happens on D-Day.
Yeah, exactly. Everything that we.
But this one just became so
regardless.
iconic and so significant. So Operation Overlord, isn't it? Isn't that the?
It's huge. I mean, to put 6 divisions ashore. I mean, I've been involved in planning and putting a battle group ashore, which is about 600 troops, and we had things like Excel spreadsheets and what have you that we could use to do the planning. How they put 6 divisions ashore with just like nothing more than a chalkboard is absolutely incredible.
Without Excel spreadsheets. But the reason why it has become known as D-Day, despite every operation being D-Day, is because of its iconic status. It's
yeah, I think so. Just because it's such an iconic, as you say, iconic and such a huge undertaking that it just got known, and it was probably pushed in the press as that.
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah.
Qualifications?
Former soldier and involved in military planning in the past.
That'll do nicely. Well played, Stu. Nice one. Also, I was right. I can't help it. You're right. Sorry. Ian's in Birmingham. Ian, question or answer?
Answer, sir.
Carry on, Ian.
The reason that surgeons are called Mr. is you were mostly right.
Thank you.
I'll let you off. It's extreme pretentiousness is the short answer, but as you correctly stated, that surgeons were developed separately from physicians, and the medics didn't like us very much and didn't think we were proper doctors.
Correct.
So
this is back to the
profession.
Back to the barber surgeon era.
Exactly. And so in the late 19th century, when we became one profession, surgeons in the UK retained the title Mr. to keep themselves separate and to be pretentious about it.
So they sort of turned the snobbery back on itself almost.
Yes,
well,
exactly
good grief. I worked that out live on the radio and because of the book that I'm reading at the moment and precisely that snobbery that I'm reading about. But I had no idea it was true. I sold it to Engine anyway because it was only Engine.
You did well.
Believe any old toot. But it was actually true all along.
Back then, they were all men, so
Yes.
Mr. was easy. These days, about 50% of my colleagues are female. Most of them go by Miss. A few like Mrs. and Ms, but I let them have whatever they prefer.
And it's not hierarchical, it's different branches of... So the bits I got wrong include the idea that you are senior to doctors.
Indeed. It's just you are a surgeon. And so a lot of people think it goes with being a consultant.
I got that wrong as well,
It's
yes.
when you pass the MRCS, the membership exam, which will be SHOs will take that exam before they become registrars. So all the registrars in surgery will generally be Mr. or Miss.
Yeah.
And then you have to pass the fellowship exam, which enables you to become a consultant.
Fantastic. That was a beautiful answer. Qualifications?
I am a fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh.
I had a feeling that you might be. Round of applause for Ian, please. Lovely
Thank you.
stuff. No, thank you. Cleared all that up in one single call. That was fantastic. Deborah's in Liverpool. Deborah, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on.
So, during the pandemic, I watched back-to-back episodes of Call the Midwife.
Okay.
When women were in the latter stages of labour, and they were they were told not to push.
Right.
They were told to pant.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why panting stops you pushing. Because even sitting here now, if I pant,
go on,
it reduces my inclination to push. Not that I'm pregnant.
No, but haven't you just answered your own question?
Well, no.
You just said that panting reduces your inclination to push and they don't want you to push.
But why?
Why don't they want you to push?
No, why does it? Why does panting do that? What goes on within the body?
Well, it's not what's going on within the body, is it? It's pushing involves clenching, doesn't it? So you take a breath.
No, it's the opposite.
No, it is not. You take a breath right now, breathe in.
Have you ever been pregnant?
Oh, yes, several times. So you take a breath and then I'm comparing it to doing a poo. I don't know if this is helpful or not, Deborah. But you take a breath and then you push. But if you're doing panting, you can't push. So I think you've answered your own question.
I don't think I have.
I think you have.
Not at all.
Well,
no. Well, no, because you mentioned clenching, and clenching is opposite to pushing.
It's not, though, is it? You're pushing like that.
It bloody is.
It's not. You're pushing now. Push. And now I'm trying to breathe now.
No.
No?
You're wrong. I want to know, and I won't accept your response, and I don't think I've answered my own question. I want to know what in the body, what reflex, what medical thing happens
that means
when you're panting, which is in the upper part of the respiratory system, prevents you from pushing when you're in labour.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. I think the answer's clenching.
It can't be clenching, otherwise you wouldn't get the baby out, would you?
But you have to stop pushing at some point so that the baby doesn't...
You pant. Does that make you clench?
I don't know. Why has David said, go on, James, do your favourite joke? What would my favourite joke be at this point in proceedings? I hate it when people think they know. I know you've got no idea. I've got no idea either. I hate it when people think they know the show better than I do. Anyway, why does panting stop you pushing when you're giving birth?
And it doesn't cause you... When you push, you don't clench.
No, all right. Let's forget about the clenching. I think we've got a different definition of clench, Deborah.
Well,
I am currently mansplaining. I am mansplaining how to have a baby at the moment. This is a new low. This is a new low. This is a new low for me, Deborah. Just out of interest, how many children have you had?
2.
Oh, all right, you win.
Okay.
It's 12:43. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Gareth is in Watford. Gareth, question or answer?
It's an answer, James.
Carry on, mate.
First of all, just want to thank you for being the voice of reason for these last kind of 7 or 8 years.
Thank you, mate. I was a right idiot before that. No, that's very kind of you. I'm very grateful.
That's the mushy part over.
Yes,
it's an answer regarding the Premier League trophy.
Oh yes, good.
There can be up to 3.
Whoa.
3 trophies, one with which will be the real one.
Yes.
And 2 dummy trophies.
So they've got
all exactly the same. But the real trophy at this present time will be at Man City in a nice big Louis Vuitton box.
Yeah.
And another one will be at Arsenal in a nice big Louis Vuitton box. So there'll be 2 trophies at each ground. I know this because being a Watford supporter.
Really?
There's
a non sequitur if ever I've heard one.
Yeah, I know, because there was an instance where when Watford were promoted back in 2015, and Bournemouth were promoted at the same time. So it all came down to the final game of the season as to who would win the trophy. Watford needed a win, and all Bournemouth had to do was win as well to claim to go up as champions. Now, the real trophy was at Watford, and I know this because I saw it.
Oh, cool.
The ribbons were on the trophy, the name was just about to be engraved. Then Sheffield Wednesday went and scored a last-minute equaliser. So instead of winning the game, Watford drew the game, finished second. Bournemouth got the dummy trophy, went up as champions.
And you know that because the real trophy was where you were.
Yeah.
That's a really lovely answer. I have to ask this, even though I already know. Qualifications?
I'm a football fan that pays attention.
There we go. Round of applause for Gareth. Happy days. Just thank you, Gareth. Just to clarify from Susan, when you're doing your pelvic floor exercises, that's clenching, and that's not what you do when you're pushing out a baby. Thank you, Sue. Every day's a school day.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James O'Brien.
I don't know how I feel about this, Tony, actually. I mean, in many ways I'm very happy for you, but on the other hand, I think that you got a bargain, an unjustifiable bargain. Tony's been in touch since I just purchased the Mystery Hour board game at a car boot sale for £2, James. I was well chuffed. I'm not surprised you were well chuffed. That's an absolute result. It's crikey. I bet there's cards missing, though. And hopefully a few pieces as well, frankly, because you shouldn't be able to secure that. Probably someone died, actually. I can't imagine any other circumstances in which you would want to surrender your Mystery Hour board game. Probably got picked up at some sort of sad sale, you might call it. I don't know. 12:49 is the time. I've still got a few questions that need answers. Vicky's in Northampton. Vicky, question or answer?
It's an answer.
Carry on.
Okay, it's an answer to the question of pushing or panting when you're giving birth.
Vicky, I'm going to be quiet for a while.
Oh, gosh, that piles the pressure on me, OK? Like, I'm not nervous enough already.
I'll interrupt you if I think you need it, but I will not be doing it for my own purposes.
Thank you. So this is the difference between a voluntary and an involuntary push. So when you're giving birth and you're almost at the point of the baby being born, the baby will put pressure on parts of the body that will elicit an involuntary response. So it's possible for women still to be pushing even though they don't think they are.
Yes.
And often as a midwife, when you say, did that feel a little bit pushy? They look a bit frightened and say no, but you can see and hear that that's happening.
Yes.
So the difference between pushing and panting is because when somebody is directed to push, when they're told to push, they will take a deep breath and put their chin on their chest, and that makes their pushes much more forceful. So you are asked to pant because it stops the glottis in your body closing.
Clenching.
So the part of your upper airway remains open and you can breathe through it rather than holding your breath and pushing down.
Yes.
So it means that the baby is descending under less pressure and less force and in a more gentle way, which is thought to be, unless there's a real emergency, it's definitely preferable for that to be a more gentle process.
When it's reached a certain point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like the home straight, as it were, Vicky.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, beautiful answer, and I think that I now feel less embarrassed about my mansplaining earlier because I don't think I embarrassed myself, did I, particularly?
No, absolutely not. But there's definitely a difference between voluntary and involuntary.
Well, that's the crucial
pushing.
bit that was missing. That's the crucial bit that's a beautiful answer. What are your qualifications, please?
I was a midwife for 10 years and did a lot of hospital and home births.
Can't say fairer than that. Round of applause for Vicky, please.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much. Vanessa is in Wokingham. Vanessa, question or answer?
Well, it's an answer, but you've already had one answer, but I'm questioning that answer in a way.
Okay.
I mean, he was right, okay?
Listen, I don't want to make any sexist presumptions here. How many military operations have you planned?
Well, none so far, but...
Good answer. Good answer. Carry on.
Well, D-Day means the day that's important in English or in American, probably, in Anglo-Saxon. But in other countries, like in France, and I speak French, D-Day is jour, which is day, J, which is J. So it's J, jour J. So,
I think you're just showing off. I don't think this is relevant to the question that we're answering at all. You're just showing off your polyglot nature.
Well, no, because he was trying to explain what D-Day was. It was as if it's a worldwide, typical British, that everybody uses it, but they don't. If it's a special day, like we always say, D-Day is when I'm going to tidy the house. So it's D-Day that day.
But that comes from the military planning.
Yeah, but then they don't say D-Day in French, and they must have had military planning, and I know
about what the French do, and we're still talking about this is.
It's important because it's not universal. In France, they'll say it's jour J that the Olympic flame is coming on it has already come into France now, and it's well on its way. But that is the important day. So it's the day that something happens, and it is in other languages too, because your interviewer or your producer, she looked it up. Yeah,
she did she? Flipping it.
Yeah, she looked it up in other languages because she didn't believe, and she used Google Translate, which is hopeless. So if you have to look into
giving away all the secrets of the show. You're not supposed. Why is the producer using Google? No one's allowed to use Google during this.
No, because she had to substantiate what I was saying, and because I knew I was right.
She substantiated what? Well, you sound like me now. What do you mean you knew you were right?
Just know that
I've still got no idea what you're talking about.
Well,
I don't know why. I'm tired. I've had a long day. I'm excited about the radars. There's a lot going on. I've got no idea what's going on. I've got to go to Glasgow after this. I'm on stage there tomorrow night.
Well, now you know. If you have to speak French and you want to say it's D-Day, you have to say jour J.
But the question was, why was D-Day called D-Day?
Well, because it was the important day. That day was
But that's
planned.
not true. It was called D-Day because all military operations take place on D-Day.
Yeah, because every day is a D. If you want to, like I'm saying, if you want to decorate the house on the 28th of May...
Why are you talking to me about decorating the house, Vanessa?
Well,
because it's the important day that something starts. That's what I mean. So in French, they would say, the military operation that's going to, I don't know, kill Napoleon or whatever is, no, not kill, you know what I mean, is jour J.
Okay, I'm going to give you a round of applause because I sense if I don't, we'll be here forever.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for everything you do. Thank you. You keep us going. You do. You really do.
You're so kind. Thank you. No, that merci, in fact. Beaucoup. Pratap's in Islington. Pratap, question or answer?
It's an answer, James, and it's an answer that has taken me 75 attempts to get through for. It's for
Let's go. Let's do it.
The question on playing cards.
Yes.
So the current deck, as we know it, originated around the Middle Ages from France, and it is thought that the four suits were generally thought to represent the four different classes of society back then.
Really?
So clergy, the military, I think farming, and trade or merchant class.
Okay.
But then within that, the four suits also represent the four seasons. And within each suit, the 13 different ranks represent the lunar cycles in a year. And then we have 52
this
cards
is all very
that
complicated.
represent 52 weeks.
Qualifications?
Years ago, I was doing research for an Alice in Wonderland dinner, and one of the courses was the Queen of Hearts' army of playing card soldiers.
Fair enough.
Research around that led me down a rabbit hole.
So it's quite complicated. Down a rabbit hole in Alice in Wonderland, the rabbit hole. Yeah? No? Oh. Round of applause for Pratap.
It was a rabbit.
I thought that was... Anyway, so it's very complicated. I think tarot had something to do with it as well, maybe. I don't know. Jonathan's in Ashford. Jonathan, question or answer?
Good afternoon, James. An answer to the rabbit one, please.
Oh, yes. Be still my beating heart.
Okay. So, of course, you're right, but Beatrix Potter spent a long time observing nature and the land around her, including her brother her vegetable garden.
Yes.
When I was studying horticulture, one of the chapters was pests and diseases.
Oh, yes.
And I love wildlife, by the way, but for horticulturalists, rabbits belong to the category of pests and diseases.
Pests and diseases.
And rodents have a preferential taste for carrot tops, which, of course, is highly destructive because if they take the top off the carrot
rots.
And they work exactly. So Beatrix Potter, great observer of nature, as we know from her cottage in the Lake District.
Not far from where all that sewage got pumped into that mere.
Oh, don't, please. Separate topic.
No, forgive me.
She will have looked at that and thought, okay, there will have been a folklore around.
Yes.
If we had time, we could dig up the folklore on farmers.
Right, carrots being particularly
That's right. And
vulnerable
like
to
brassicas.
pests. Do they really?
Like brassicas, yes, and there's a whole list of.
And we think that she started it. We think because that was such a popular story that the relationship between rabbits and carrots fell into popular polls.
If I hadn't been on hold for so long, I could have got out some of my historic gardening books and checked to see whether any of them predate.
Right,
but I think we'll find that in
you're fired. How dare you leave? Jonathan could have got out some of his historic gardening books if you hadn't kept him on hold for so long with Vanessa banging on about Journey J or something.
Sorry,
I'm sorry.
I really love you all, so that's fine.
I love you too. Qualifications?
Retired horticulturalist and
You're not retired at all. You may no longer be doing it for money, Jonathan, but a horticulturalist never hangs up his hoe.
You've made me very happy.
Round of applause for Jonathan.
Bit sad, but there we go.
Beautiful answer. Thank you. Oof, that's it for another day. I'm giving it to Vicky, the midwife. It was close. It was going to be Jack with the question about rabbits and carrots, but I felt that Vicky saved me from the accusation of having tried to mansplain childbirth to a woman. Which I did do, but it turns out I was right and she was wrong. That's it from me for another day. We'll be doing it all again tomorrow morning from 10. If you missed any of today's show, you can you can listen back on catch up. You can go for a walk.
Put your feet up, relax.
Absolutely. But I don't mind.
Have a drink.
I'm easy. If you missed today's show, that's fine. You can listen on catch up on Global Player, the official LBC app, where you can also pause and rewind live radio. Download now for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick, but now it's time for the Radar Queen.
Well, not quite. I'm still chasing your tail.
Sheila Fogarty.
Thank you very much, James.
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 Fogarty.